Angie was told that there was a secret unlike any other in the world, and that Vishal would never succumb to sleep nor change until the final purification. Her mother, Lady, asked if Angie had finished her preparations, reminding her that when the noble blessing was shed, those who endured would be granted an incorruptible life. Angie responded that she had finished. She was ready to go, and so the time of transcendence would begin. For the first time in her life, Angie received an invitation to the Duke's manor. She lived on Cullinan Island, a place with lush beach forests and rolling blue waves that splashed against its shore. Suddenly, Angie was taken by a flashback. She had been nurtured by the survivors of a devastating war on the mainland who had transformed it into a land of abundance. People of various races coexisted peacefully, bound together like kin, all guided by the fate of Kylam and a shared purpose. Angie moved to the island with her parents at such a young age that she had no recollection of the mainland. Yet she had no desire to cling to those distant memories, for she loved the island deeply. She could not envision a more perfect place than this, and all of it was made possible by the benevolence of the Duke and his family. As she traveled, Angie found herself marveling at the Duke's carriage, finally realizing the gravity of the moment. She had been invited to keep Lord Kylek company, something she could hardly believe. Her mother had told her that Lord Kylek was the sole heir to House Blackwell, the rulers of the island, but he had been confined to his manor due to a long illness. Angie was to visit Lord Kylek once a week to keep him company. Her mother warned that the young nobleman had grown particular and sensitive due to his illness, which could lead him to treat her unkindly. But Angie understood the importance of this visit, for her family owed a great debt of gratitude to House Blackwell. She hoped that Lord Kylek would appreciate the preparations she had made for him. The gates to the Duke's manor opened, and an older woman named Louise Dunst, the head housekeeper, welcomed Angie inside. Angie greeted her politely, and Louise instructed her to step inside, as the young master was waiting. As Angie entered, she was awestruck by the interior of the castle. It was lavish yet elegant, almost as though she had stepped into a different world entirely. As Angie explored, she noticed several portraits on the walls. She realized that this spot must be reserved for the young lord, though there was no portrait of him yet. She wondered what he looked like, imagining that he might have blue-gray eyes like Duke Edward Blackwell. Louise called for Angie's attention, guiding her further. There were a few important things Angie needed to remember. She wouldn't be able to see the master's face, as he was quite unwell, and if anything seemed out of place, she should call for help. She was also told to answer only the questions asked of her and to refrain from asking unnecessary questions. Angie nodded, understanding the rules. Louise looked at Angie with a strange expression before knocking on a door. She politely asked if she could enter. When the door opened, it revealed the interior of the room. Angie took a deep breath, reflecting on the reality of being in his space. Louise then announced that she had brought the girl meant to be his. However, Killick's faint and irritated voice replied, expressing his displeasure. He reminded Louise that he had made it clear there were to be no more visits. Angie stood frozen in confusion, wondering how it was possible that he didn't want any visitors. There were rumors circulating that the reason Lord Kylek had not been seen outside his residence was due to the intensive chemical treatments he had undergone during his prolonged illness, which had left his face disfigured. The sight of his grotesque appearance was said to render people rigid, as if they had gazed upon Medusa herself. This, Angie thought, could be why he objected to her presence. Despite the rumors, she was nervous, but it wasn't about his appearance. Louise, the housekeeper, apologized for not seeking Kylek's permission before bringing Angie in. She explained that she had been unable to disobey Lord Kylek's father's orders. Kylek sighed in response, acknowledging that Louise couldn't disobey his father. He forgave her this time, but warned her not to expect such mercy in the future. Louise promptly left the room. Then Louise whispered to Angie, urging her to go ahead and do what she had come there for. Angie, though anxious, reminded herself of her mother's words about repaying the family's debt to House Blackwell. But what if Lord Kylek cast her out? Before Angie could ponder further, Kylek's voice called out to her. He told her to come closer, but not to get too near, just stay by the window. Angie hurried over to the chair by the window and sat down. Kylek then asked for her name, and Angie responded, introducing herself as Angela, though she said she preferred to be called Angie. She mentioned that she was the daughter of Rizdal, the keeper of the North Shore cottage. Kylek asked why she had come, and Angie explained that she had been honored with the great privilege of keeping him company. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if he would find her story dull, but decided to proceed. Since he had allowed her to remain, she wanted to read him what she had prepared. Kylek, intrigued, asked her about the story. Angie explained that it was merely a product of her imagination, but she asked if he would like to hear it. As she began to tell the story, Angie thought about how her great passion was reading, and the skills she felt most confident in were sewing and embroidery. She realized that her humble attempts at lacework would likely not impress someone like Lord Kylek, who had grown accustomed to luxury. She imagined that during his confinement to the mansion, the multitude of books he must have read surpassed her own modest collection. But she also thought that perhaps Lord Kylek had experienced moments similar to the ones she would recount in her stories. Moments when, on a sunny day, he might have closed his book, gazed out the window, and noticed how the shape of the drifting clouds resembled scenes from the tale he had just read. In that moment, he might have wanted to converse with someone who had imagined the same scene. Angie believed that this might be why she had been chosen to be his companion among the many children on the island. She continued, saying that some of the stories she would tell might already be familiar to him, while others would have endings created purely from her imagination. She asked him to kindly listen and share his thoughts afterward, promising that even if he found her stories nonsensical, she wouldn't take offense. Kylek responded indifferently, stating that even if she were to take offense, it would have no effect on him whatsoever. He told her to proceed with her storytelling. Angie felt a surge of happiness that he had given her the chance to tell him a story. She nodded eagerly, ready to begin. However, Kylek warned her that if her tale turned out to be absurd nonsense, he wouldn't hesitate to have her thrown out. Angie assured him that she understood. She had always enjoyed telling stories, and everyone at church had always enjoyed them. She then asked if he was familiar with the story of the Cumnian Sibyl, and proceeded to recount the tale of the ancient Greek prophetess. As she told the story, Angie's throat became dry and parched, and she felt a strange unease, as if the very atmosphere around her had shifted, but Lord Kylek allowed her to finish without interruption or asking her to leave. Finally, Angie left the room without any issues, but she couldn't help but remember that Kylek had called for her to return the following week at the same time. She was overjoyed that he had called her name, and as she walked away she thought how easy it had turned out to be to please him, much easier than she had expected. As she left, Angie thought about the story she would tell next time. She didn't notice, but Kylek was watching her from the window. A man was working late into the night, but it turned out that he wasn't working. He was trying to escape from the island. His parents had tried to stop him, telling him he had a blessed life. They reminded him that Duke Blackwell had gathered the families of war survivors and granted them land to live on. His parents believed the mainland was nothing but hell, but the man felt the opposite. He thought they were wrong, and that life on the island had become stifling. He wanted to leave and go somewhere else. He had packed food and water, ready to sail into the sea. As he was preparing to leave, he thought it was strange that no one had ever attempted to escape the island before. He believed it would be easy. No one had tried it until now. As he sailed away, he saw the wind turbines on the horizon, much bigger than he had expected. They were the only boundary between the island and the outside world. Once he passed them, he thought he would be free. But just as he got closer, something pushed his boat back. He couldn't understand what had happened, and then he saw someone, terrified, begging to be left alone. But the man couldn't spare him. Inside a locked case, a figure was begging for blood, but the young master only stood there in silence. The next morning, at Angie's house, everyone was impressed by her embroidery skills. Angie felt happy to see that people liked her work. She had stitched flowers onto a piece of cloth. The flowers were marigolds, and instead of using her name, they had become her little signature. People recognized the marigolds as Angie's unique touch, and Angie felt warm when she saw them. She hoped to one day create garments inspired by their beauty, with the goal of making clothes that could bring smiles to people. A girl who was present was so impressed by Angie's work that she declared she would hire her to make a dress for her. The girl's name was Letica, the only daughter of the Duke's administrator. Letica wanted Angie to work for her so badly that she proposed a formal contract. Everyone laughed and enjoyed watching Letica hug Angie, admiring how well they got along. But the lightheartedness soon gave way to concern when someone brought up troubling news. Small animals were being found dead around the forest. People were worried about what could have harmed the creatures. Angie didn't feel good about the dead animals. Just then, a man arrived, sweating heavily and hoping to share some news. He reported that Elliot's body had washed up on the southern coast. No one could believe it. Elliot, the only son of the Hawken family who managed the distillery. Angie was puzzled and asked, "Isn't Elliot the only son of the Hawken family? What on earth could have happened to him?" The man explained that Elliot had attempted to leave the island by boat the previous night. Some people believed that his death was divine punishment for betraying Duke Blackwell. The community took this as an opportunity to remind their children not to leave the island, reinforcing the idea that no one should ever attempt to escape. The adults in the village said that Elliot had tried to leave the island the previous night, only to be attacked by sharks. The news of his sudden death left the residents of the island in shock. For 4 days, Elliot's parents didn't speak to anyone. Angie had never witnessed anyone in such deep sorrow before, and yet, Mrs. Hawkins approached Angie one day and asked if she was off to run some errands. She commented on how beautiful the weather was, saying it felt as if they were receiving God's blessings. Angie found Mrs. Hawkins's sudden change in demeanor strange. The woman, who had looked deeply disturbed just the day before, was now smiling brightly, without a trace of sadness or shadow on her face. It was as if someone had wiped the sorrow from her memory entirely. Back at the castle, Angie thought about Mrs. Hawkins's behavior. She had never experienced sorrow herself, so she wondered if it was a feeling that could disappear in the blink of an eye. Kylek, noticing her distracted mood, responded that there must be more to things than met the eye. He suggested she have some tea to help calm her down, as it seemed she was still shocked by what she had witnessed. Angie thanked him and picked up the cup, sipping the tea. Kylek then reminded her that, while they were on the subject of Mrs. Hawkins's strange behavior, she should keep her observations between them. Just as she had found Mr. Hawkins's behavior odd, others might think it suspicious if she voiced similar thoughts. Angie nodded in understanding and promised to be careful, feeling thankful that Lord Kylek had listened to her. She wondered if he had found her comments objectionable, though she was surprised he had paid her any attention at all. Kylek, not missing a beat, told her that if she had any common sense, she would have kept her thoughts to herself without needing him to remind her. Angie smiled inwardly, thinking, I guess that was wishful thinking. She commented that the tea smelled nice, noting that it was a little different from the usual tea the islanders drank. Kylek offered her some of the tea leaves to take home, saying he would let Louise know. Angie eagerly accepted, thanking him. Kylek then brought up the story she had told him about the Kumean Sibyl, the priestess who had wished for immortality. He recalled how Apollo had granted her thousands of years of life, but she had only watched her body wither away over the years, realizing too late that she had been cursed, not blessed. Angie agreed, confirming that the Sibyl's wish had led to her suffering, not eternal happiness. Kylek then asked her what she would do if Apollo were to offer her immortality and eternal youth. Angie responded that she would turn it down. Kylek, curious, asked why. Angie explained that while she might have been tempted to accept such a gift without thinking, she believed that the beauty and meaning of life stemmed from its transience. Even the most exquisite flowers wilt when their time has come, only for new buds to sprout in their place. To her, that was the way of Providence itself. Kylek seemed intrigued, but pressed her further, asking if she was saying that immortality meant nothing to her. Angie nodded, saying she was sure there were plenty of people who would wish for eternal life, but it wasn't something she personally desired. Kylek, surprised, thought to himself that it was hard to believe there were still people like her left on the island. Just then, Louise knocked on the door, and Angie realized that her time was up. She told Kylek that she would be back next week, then left the room before Kylek could say anything further. After she left, Louise asked Kylik what he thought about the new remedy, wondering if it was a good match for him. Kylik frowned and told her not to call Angie by that name, as the mere mention of it put him in a foul mood. Kylik asked his father about what exactly a remedy was. He wanted to know what happened to someone if they were selected to be his remedy. His father answered that once someone was chosen, there was no going back. From that moment on, that person would be his remedy for all eternity. Kylik then asked, almost bitterly, if that was why his father had killed his mother, simply because she had been the remedy. His father explained that the concept of a remedy originated from a terrible curse, something born out of human greed and a desire for something that should never have been sought. Kylik declared to himself that he would never walk the same path as his father. Later, some girls were gossiping about Duke Blackwell's family. One girl asked if it was true that the Duke had other heirs. Another girl, who had overheard the adults talking, confirmed that years ago, the Duchess Eugenia had given birth to many children, including twins, but all of them had died shortly after birth, except for Lord Kylik. Afterward, the Duchess had also passed away. The girls whispered about the rumors surrounding Lord Kylik's face, speculating that the medication he took had caused his face to become disfigured. They said that when he covered his face, he looked like a ghostly monster. Letica added that it was common knowledge that Kylik's temper was so foul that he supposedly beat his servants every day. Angie, overhearing this, couldn't hold back her defense of Lord Kylik. She said that they were being too harsh on him. She explained that while he could be sharp in tone, he was actually quite sensitive and considerate. The other girls questioned how Angie could know that. Letica asked if Angie had met Lord Kylik in person, or if she had just heard those things from others. Angie hesitated, recalling that her mother had told her to keep her visits to the manor a secret. She replied that she was simply saying it didn't seem right to gossip about someone when it was the Duke's benevolent rule that allowed them to live in prosperity. The other girls, somewhat reluctantly, agreed. Letica, though, admitted that while Angie was right, Kylik's face was off-putting, to be honest. Angie responded that she didn't know much about what he looked like. All she knew was that he was tall with a low voice, and despite his initially cold demeanor, he showed subtle consideration for others. She added that she had never really wondered about his face until now, and the only reason she had been afraid of him at first was because she had expected him to throw her out. But strangely, Angie couldn't shake Letica's words from her mind. Back at the castle, Angie thought she would probably not see Kylik that day, since she was told he had matters to attend to in his study. She waited for 20 minutes, starting to feel sleepy. As she looked out the window, she reflected on how beautiful the view was, though it was a pity that he could only enjoy it from afar. Angie didn't know exactly how ill Kylik was, but she thought it would be nice if they could go for a stroll together. As she dozed off, Kylik arrived, but Angie had already fallen asleep in her chair. Seeing her there, he covered her with a blanket and looked at her quietly. Earlier, Jerome had mentioned to Kylik that the rumors originating from the church had spread among the children. Kylik, worried, assumed that Angie must think of him as some terrible monster because of those rumors. Jerome reassured him that it wasn't the case, and that Angie had actually been quite protective of him, showing a reaction that no one else had. He offered to take care of the matter, but Kylik declined, saying there was no need to concern themselves with such trivial matters, and asked Jerome to just keep an eye on things. Kylik reflected on how remarkable it was that Angie had such a different mindset from the others. It made him want to expect even more from her. He thought to himself, "Angie Risdell, I want you to..." But he didn't finish his thought aloud. Angie woke up startled and immediately called out for Lord Kylik. He instructed her to keep her eyes closed. Angie was confused, wondering why he wasn't behind the canopy as usual, and what was happening. Kylik told her it would be best for her to go home today, as he had matters that needed his attention. Still dazed, Angie responded with a polite yes, and she noticed the scent of roses surrounding him. Kylik, however, asked her to visit him 3 times a week from now on, expressing his desire to hear more of the stories she told. Angie, surprised but pleased, asked if she could really come that often, and Kylik affirmed that he would be looking forward to her visits. Angie returned home to the cottage where she helped her parents with housekeeping. It was a peaceful place, especially near the northern cliff, which made it cool and refreshing during summer. While walking there, she noticed that the roses were in full bloom, meaning that the harvest would soon begin. She remembered that around this time, Blackwell produced a powder from Bengal roses, which they mixed with water for the islanders to consume. The smell of the roses was heavenly, and Angie thought about how similar the scent was to Lord Kylik. She still couldn't believe what he had said earlier, and the more time she spent at the Blackwell Manor, the more she wondered about the kind of person Lord Kylik truly was. Later, while at the manor, Angie asked Kylik if he could pull back the canopy slightly, but he immediately refused. She accepted his answer, though she thought about how strict he could be at times. Then Louise came in with a gift from Kylik, a batch of cookies, as he had noticed that Angie seemed to enjoy them. Angie smiled and thanked Louise. Curious, Angie asked Lord Kylik what kind of food he liked best and if he had a favorite dessert. He responded with a dismissive comment, almost laughing at her question. Angie couldn't help but feel that sometimes Kylik drew a line between them, though she had moments when she saw glimpses of his warmth, like the late afternoon sun. At times she caught him off guard, and once she even made him laugh, though she wasn't sure if she'd really done so. Still, she wondered what expression he had when he looked at her, and she wished she could see the person behind the veil. Later that day, Angie overheard some rumors about animals mysteriously dying in the forest. This unsettling news stayed in the back of her mind, but when her mother called her to finish hanging the laundry, she set the thought aside and returned to her chores. While she was leaving for the manor the next day, Angie thanked the carriage driver, saying she'd work her way to the entrance today since the weather was so nice. He encouraged her to take her time and enjoy the garden. As she walked along the familiar path, she reflected on how long it had been since her first visit to the manor. The gentle warmth of the sunlight and the sweet scent of flowers filled the air, and Angie realized that autumn was soon approaching, bringing with it the passage of time. As she reached the manor, she was greeted by Louise, who welcomed her warmly. Angie responded with a cheerful good morning. Before she knew it, she had reached the age of 18. 3 years had passed. During those years, which felt both long and fleeting, Angie's relationship with Lord Kylik had undergone many changes. One day, as Angie began to tell Lord Kylik a story, he suddenly interrupted and asked her to call him Kai from then on. Surprised, Angie agreed. As the day grew late, she noticed the time and began to prepare to leave. Kai told her that dinner had already been prepared and that she should eat before leaving. He also offered that she could stay and have her meal there if she wished. Angie remarked on how much she loved the assortment of fine teas he kept, noting that she usually only had rose tea at home. Kai replied that he wanted to give her an additional reason to visit, hinting that he was making it special for her. As her bond with Kai grew stronger, Angie found herself eagerly looking forward to their moments together. It was different from the story of Psyche, who had used a candle to illuminate the face of the god Eros. Angie, however, had neither the courage nor the folly to steal a glance at him. And so, the years passed. One winter, Kai noticed that Angie had caught a cold again. It wasn't as severe as previous times, but she had a mild cough. He seemed concerned and remarked that this was the same complaint she had had the year before, and he didn't like it. Then, in a surprising turn, Kai told Angie that her birthday was approaching and that he wanted to give her a gift. Angie was shocked by his words. Memories of the past gifts he had given her over the past 3 years flashed through her mind. She thought to herself that he always surprised her with gifts, without asking her what she wanted. Kai explained that this year, for her 18th birthday, he wanted to honor her coming of age with something special. Angie felt as though he could read her thoughts, as if he was able to know exactly what she needed. She reflected on all the gifts he had already given her, never having thought about what she would ask for. She hesitated, wondering if there was something she could wish for that could truly capture what she felt. Before she could finish her sentence, there was a sudden coughing sound from the canopy. Concerned, Angie called out to him, but Kai told her not to come closer. Some of the servants entered the room, and Louise, one of the servants, hurried Angie away, urging her to come quickly. Angie couldn't help but wish for one thing: to be allowed to cross the divide between her and Kai. She longed to run to him and embrace him, but she knew that this was not possible. Later, as Angie prayed, she reflected on her feelings, comparing her minor cold to the suffering Kai was clearly enduring. She prayed that her prayers would reach the heavens, hoping for his recovery. Returning to her parents' home that evening, Angie noticed something unusual. Someone was discussing something quite serious in the distance. She didn't want to concern herself with it and hurried inside. Upon entering, her parents greeted her warmly, and her mother handed her a letter from House Blackwell. Angie was surprised. The letter's handwriting was familiar, and she wondered what it could be about. The letter read, "Dear Angie, you must have been startled by the events of this afternoon. As much as I would like to speak to you in person, my current condition does not allow for it. Therefore, I have decided to write you instead. I regret that I will need to focus on receiving treatment from now on. However, as I mentioned before, I would like to give you something special for your birthday. Please let me know your desired gift. Once I have recovered and returned to my chamber on the 3rd floor, I hope you will be the first person I see. May God's grace and blessings be with you." Reading the letter, Angie felt a deep sense of gratitude and longing. She was touched that Kai was still caring for her despite his own suffering. Louise, meanwhile, informed Kai that he needed a blood transfusion from the remedy immediately. Kai, however, insisted that he had no intention of receiving it. Louise tried to argue, but Kai firmly repeated that he would never allow anything to harm Angie. Angie was filled with relief upon receiving a letter from Kai. She had been consumed with worry about his condition, and the letter reassured her. She hoped for his treatment to go smoothly, no matter how long it took. She would wait to greet him when he returned, and there was nothing she desired for her birthday, except for one wish. She hesitated, but eventually she wrote that her wish was to see his face. Kai, on the other hand, had been deeply moved by Angie's presence. He expressed that she had no idea what thoughts crossed his mind whenever he saw her. Her genuine smile, unlike the others, her ability to speak her mind without being swayed by others, and her refusal to yearn for eternal life, all these things enchanted him. He was captivated by her small, delicate hands, her luscious hair, her brilliant eyes, and the way her cheeks would blush when she was shy. He admitted that he struggled to control his feelings whenever he saw her lips. But more than anything, he wondered if, after learning his secrets, she would still stay by his side. Meanwhile, at home, Angie was having a cozy moment with her parents. She had been sick with a cold, and her mother had made her a favorite dessert, one that she recognized as being made from strawberries from Mary's farm. Angie's mother insisted that she eat her favorite food since she couldn't seem to shake her cold. Her father encouraged her to dig in, and her mother also suggested she drink some water to help with the cough. Once she felt better, her parents recommended having some rose tea, which they drank often because it worked wonders for health. As they talked, Angie's mother asked about her work with the children in the chapel, and Angie confirmed that she had been helping them learn to sing. Her mother inquired if the children had been good, to which Angie replied that they were adorable little sparrows. When asked about the songs, Angie explained that they had been learning children's songs prepared by Letitia, but Letitia had asked her to come up with something of her own for the next session. Angie was thinking about what song she should teach, maybe something about the sea or the night. In the midst of this, a sudden thought struck Angie. She began to hum a melody, but when her mother and father didn't recognize it, she was puzzled. She couldn't remember where she had heard the tune, but it had popped into her head out of nowhere. Her mother and father both said they had never heard the song before. Angie found it strange that she could remember the melody, but couldn't place where it had come from. Later, as the evening grew late, Angie's mother told her to get ready for bed. Tomorrow was her birthday, and her mother promised to make something special to celebrate. Angie was excited and replied that she couldn't wait. Her mother wished her good night, and Angie wished her the same in return. As Angie lay in bed, she found herself still thinking about that mysterious melody. She couldn't remember anyone singing it to her, and it lingered in her mind. That night, as the sun set over the sea and the crescent moon glowed, Angie's dreams began to take a strange turn. She heard a voice calling out to her, asking if she could hear or see the speaker. The voice seemed to be trying to get her attention, but she couldn't make out who it was. The voice spoke of a song, asking if she recognized it, and though it sounded familiar, she couldn't quite place it. The name the person gave her also remained elusive. She was left baffled in her dreams, wondering what it all meant. Angie woke up, still unsure whether the previous night had been a dream. The memories felt so real, though the events that had transpired were strangely elusive. Her mother called out to her from the doorway, asking if she was awake. Angie responded, groggily affirming that she was. Her mother told her to come outside and take a look at something. A pile of gifts was waiting for her, including one from House Blackwell. Curious, Angie wondered aloud what the gifts might be. As she looked through the pile, one particular package caught her attention, a note addressed to her, which read, "To Angie, lover of winter and snow." Angie recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Kai. She quickly read the letter. "Dear Angie, I wish you a joyful 18th birthday. Though it is a pity that I cannot deliver this in person, know that my letter contains my sincerest wishes. May this day be your happiest, and may your joy extend beyond tomorrow and into the days after. I am doing my best to recover, so please wait just 10 more days. I shall give you your real gift then. The item I am sending along with this letter is a snow globe, which allows you to experience the beauty of snow all year round, as if it were always your birthday. I hope you like it." Angie marveled at the snow globe, finding it incredibly beautiful, almost as if it were a scene straight out of a fairy tale. She couldn't help but feel a warm sense of gratitude toward Kai. The other gifts were thoughtful, but this snow globe felt like a special token from him. She wondered what he meant by real gift, speculating that it might mean he would finally reveal himself to her in person. Her mother, seeing her excitement, remarked how delightful it was. She pointed out that this was the first time Kai had sent her a birthday gift. She asked if Kai had grown fond of her, and Angie felt a flush of embarrassment if she was sure. Her mother affirmed, saying that Kai's birthday was the very next day. Angie was stunned, realizing she had been unaware of Kai's birthday for the past 3 years. Her mother explained that both Duke Blackwell and Lord Kai preferred to let their birthdays pass quietly, without any celebration. She told Angie not to mention it the next time she visited, as it was an unspoken rule in House Blackwell. Angie struggled to understand why they would avoid such an important occasion. She expressed her discomfort at the idea, feeling that birthdays were special, and it upset her whenever she saw people foregoing such celebrations. She also voiced her concern about Kai's health, wondering what illness he might have. Her heart ached for him, knowing that he couldn't experience the simplest joys of life. Her mother responded firmly, advising Angie never to voice such concerns in front of others. She explained that House Blackwell was no ordinary family. They carried heavy burdens, and it was important for people like them to respect their wishes. However, her mother suggested that if Angie truly felt worried, she could pray for Lord Kai. That night, Angie prayed for Kai, writing in her journal about her birthday celebration, filled with heartfelt wishes and many gifts. She thanked Kai for the snow globe, which had given her the gift of eternal winter. She expressed her hope that once Kai's treatments were complete, she would finally be able to see his smile. She clung to the wish that he would be restored to health, hoping he could experience the joys he deserved. The next day, as Angie walked outside, she overheard a conversation near the corner. The voices were talking about a blood transfusion and a remedy, but the details were vague and fragmented. Angie stood there, bewildered, trying to make sense of what she had heard. One of the voices mentioned Mrs. Dunst and how the procedure went against their teachings. The conversation ended abruptly, and Angie was left confused. She wondered what they were talking about. Had she seen those people before? As she turned the corner, she noticed a man approaching her. He smiled politely and greeted her, mentioning that their paths had crossed before. He asked if she remembered him. Angie was startled when the man spoke to her, asking if she had not seen him before. She quickly assured him that she had indeed seen him. The man explained that he was there to help his aunt, who served as a caretaker at the chapel. Angie, recognizing the name, responded with a sudden realization. She guessed that his aunt must be Hester, and the man confirmed it. As Angie reflected on the man, she realized that the woman who had been with him the last time she saw him must have been Hester. She remembered something her mother had once told her. Hester's older sister had passed away from an illness many years ago. The child she had raised, the man in front of her, was born with a delicate constitution and had rarely left the house. Angie recalled her mother saying that he had albinism, which might explain why his eyes appeared purple. It seemed to mirror Kai's situation in some ways, and Angie couldn't shake the comparison. The man then asked her if she still didn't trust him. Angie hesitated, unsure of what to say. She started to respond but was cut off when the man offered to walk her home, noting how late it was and how dark the night had become. Angie declined, saying she was fine and often took that path alone. She quickly said goodbye and walked away. The man sighed, feeling disappointed that he hadn't even had a chance to tell her his name. Later that night, as Angie slept in her room, she found herself dreaming again. This time the man appeared in her dream, calling out to her, but she was unable to speak. Suddenly a blazing fire erupted from nowhere, and she could not understand where it had come from. The man in her dream told her that they would meet again and not to forget him. He introduced himself as Martin Silva. Angie awoke abruptly, her heart pounding, and her breath coming in heavy gasps. The dream was still vivid in her mind when she suddenly heard a scream. It sounded eerily similar to the one she had heard in her dream. Driven by curiosity and unease, she decided she had to investigate. She wondered aloud if the sound had come from a beast or if it had been something else entirely. As she moved cautiously in the direction of the noise, she noticed something watching her from the bushes. Her heart raced, and in her fright, she dropped her lamp. She saw a massive shadow moving toward her and panic set in. But just as the shadow loomed closer, Kai emerged from the darkness. Angie couldn't see him clearly in her frightened state, and before she could react, she fainted. However, just as she was about to fall, Kai caught her in his arms. In a soft, almost wistful voice, he whispered, "Angie, how am I going to give you your gift now?" Kai glanced behind him as he spoke, his voice heavy with concern. He muttered that it seemed his father had finally quenched his thirst. He wasn't sure how Angie had ended up so far from home, but he warned her that the forest, and the island as a whole, was a dangerous place. He urged her to hold on just a little longer. Once he had the strength, he swore he would break the curse with his own hands to protect her. The next morning, Angie called out to her mother. Her mother, just about to wake her, greeted her with a warm, "Good morning." Angie asked, a bit confused, how she had gotten home the previous night. Her mother was puzzled and asked what she meant. Angie explained she had been out last night, but her mother seemed unaware of this. She was even more baffled when Angie mentioned hearing a scream in the woods. They sat down together, and her mother tried to make sense of it. Her mother gently reminded Angie that if she had truly gone into the forest, her clothes would have been muddy. But they were spotless, and the front door had been locked when her mother went to check on her in the morning. Angie had been asleep, just as usual. Her mother suggested that it was likely just a nightmare and advised her to stop dwelling on the strange thoughts. She suggested Angie put those silly ideas out of her mind and come down for breakfast. But Angie felt troubled. She couldn't shake the feeling that what had happened wasn't a dream. She insisted that she had seen someone in the forest, a man who was so beautiful it took her breath away. She remembered everything vividly, how the man had been standing in a green meadow and shouting his name, Martin Silva. Her mother seemed to be listening for a moment, but then interrupted, asking if Angie had said something. Angie quickly denied it, brushing it off as nothing. She decided that telling her mother would only make her think even more strangely of her. Instead, she resolved to investigate on her own to find out whether Martin Silva really existed. Her mother, changing the subject, offered Angie some fruit and suggested that since her cough had improved, she could have some rose tea. Angie declined, preferring honey tea until she felt completely better. Her mother mentioned in passing that she had heard that Lord Kylik's condition had been steadily improving. Angie was surprised to hear this and asked if it was true. Her mother confirmed it, saying that the new treatment was nearing completion. Angie felt a sense of relief. Perhaps her prayers had reached heaven. All she wanted was to be able to talk to Kai again, even if it was just hearing his voice. When she returned to the manor later, Angie overheard a conversation between a couple and the carriage man. They were discussing spring cleaning, a thorough cleaning of the manor that was typically done around this time of year. However, due to some of the maids coming down with the flu, they were in urgent need of more staff. Angie noticed the carriage man trying to pass her a note. He greeted her, saying that the woman would be home by tomorrow evening. The couple replied that it should be fine, noting she had a cold but was getting better. The note, however, was from Kai. It read, "I would like to give you your final birthday gift tonight. Zakari will be seeking your assistance with the spring cleaning. Meet me in the General Life Gardens tonight." Angie felt a surge of happiness and excitement as she read the note. The carriage man asked if she thought she would be all right going. Angie smiled and nodded, saying she would gladly help with the cleaning. As she made her way to the General Life Gardens that evening, Angie reflected on how the lies just kept piling up. But this was the only way she could see Kai. The General Life Gardens, known as the Greenhouse of Blackwell Heights, was said to have been lovingly constructed by Duke Blackwell for Lady Eugenia. It was a sacred and beautiful place, and tonight, in the heart of it, Angie was about to meet someone. When she arrived, she gasped in disbelief. Standing before her was the man from the forest. Kai greeted her softly. "Good evening, Angie." Kai greeted Angie in the evening, and Angie recognized his voice immediately. She asked if it was really him, and Kai confirmed that it was. Angie then questioned how Kai had come to find her after she ran into someone in the woods. Kai explained that it was him she had encountered and that she had likely lost consciousness due to shock, so he had carried her home. He added that it seemed she remembered everything that had happened. Angie recalled how her mother had insisted that it was all a dream, and there had been no sign that she had ventured outside. Kai revealed that he had erased all traces of her presence to prevent her parents from worrying. He had removed her footprints in the snow and returned her cloak to its usual spot. Angie asked why Kai had been in the forest, and Kai explained that he had also been woken by a strange scream. It turned out that something was wrong with the wind scythes, which was the source of the noise. Jerome had informed him later, but oddly, no one else had gone out to investigate except for Angie. Angie agreed, still uncertain about the origin of the scream, wondering if it could have really come from the wind scythes. She had been sure it sounded human. Kai then asked her if she liked her birthday gift. Angie, blushing, admitted that she had often imagined the person who had given it to her, but had never expected someone as striking as Kai. Kai then asked if he could step closer, assuring her that she could push him away if she felt uncomfortable, and that he would respect her wishes. Angie thought to herself how she couldn't bring herself to reject him. In the next moment, Kai kissed her. Angie felt her heart pounding and her mind overwhelmed by the sweetness of his breath. She felt as if ecstasy were washing over her, and it was clear to her that this was no dream. She couldn't believe she had kissed Kai, the heir to House Blackwell. Kai then asked if Angie was all right. Angie responded that she wasn't, and Kai worried that he had done something she didn't want. Angie assured him that it wasn't that at all, and that she had wanted it, but she was concerned about their different circumstances. Kai reassured her, telling her that she didn't need to worry about their differences. He reminded her of how precious she was to him. Suddenly, the sound of glasses shattering was heard. Kai's father, in a conversation with Jerome, expressed that Kai was more precious to him than anyone else, and he wished for his son to live a life free from harm. He instructed Jerome to do whatever was necessary, whether it be new drugs, witchcraft, or a remedy, to save Kai, no matter the cost. Kai asked Angie if she felt the same way about him, but quickly added that if she didn't, that was a different matter. Angie reassured him that she did feel the same way. She explained that she had waited for this moment for a long time, praying every night and envisioning the moment when they would finally stand face to face. She had hoped for the day when she could speak to him while looking into his eyes, but given her humble background, she wasn't sure if they could ever grow closer. Kai then shared that his late mother had been the daughter of his father's piano tutor. Angie was surprised by this revelation, admitting that she had always assumed Kai's mother came from a family of equal standing to House Blackwell. Kai explained that being Kylik Blackwell should not pose any problems for their relationship. He said all he wanted was an answer that came from her heart. Angie, feeling her heart pound uncontrollably, thought to herself that she wasn't sure what her heart truly wanted, but she knew she felt the same way about him. Summoning her courage, she decided to be brave and said aloud that she felt the same. Kai then embraced Angie, and as they did, someone watched from a distance, clearly displeased by the moment. Meanwhile, Martin was struggling with disturbing dreams. He had seen a blonde girl in his dreams repeatedly, and the man she was with was Kylik Blackwell, who had introduced himself as the heir to House Blackwell. Martin found this odd and troubling, especially since he had never met the girl before. He wondered if these dreams were real or just coincidences, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something more was at play, connected to the Trieste imperial family's recognition of Kylam as an official religion and the mysterious events on Cullinan Island. He questioned whether all of this was just fate or if he was losing his mind. Later, Angie was deep in thought about her conversation with Kai. He had apologized, saying that he would need to continue his treatment for a while longer, as the development of the new drug was still in the trial and error phase. He said they might not be able to see each other for some time, and asked if she would be all right. Angie told him that of course she would, as her only wish was for him to get better. Inside, she wondered if anyone had heard her, and she hoped that this separation wouldn't last too long. She decided she just needed to be patient for now, and not feel anxious. Angie's thoughts turned to Martin Silva, the name she had heard recently. She didn't see his name in the book or the birthday list she kept, but she was sure that her sister figure had mentioned him before. She hadn't had such dreams until now, and the connection between them was starting to make her curious. She decided to look into the matter further and check the island registration records, wondering if his name might be there. Angie asked the registry clerk if there was any name resembling Martin Silva in the records, but he replied that there was nothing remotely like it. He showed her the register, which contained the names of everyone who had lived on the island for the past 20 years, but there was no mention of Martin Silva. Angie considered the possibility of someone she had never seen before appearing in her dreams, unsure whether this person even existed. She wondered if perhaps he was a ghost. The thought of a ghost crossed her mind, and she asked the clerk if there were any residents who had met a bad end while trying to escape the island, like Elliot, who had tried to row his boat past the wind scythes. The clerk said that, as far as he knew, there had been no such cases, but Angie could take a look at the death register if she wanted. Just as Angie was about to respond, Letitia appeared and greeted her, also saying hello to Mikkel. Letitia reminded Angie that they were supposed to get together to make Guaypur lace. Angie decided to look at the register another time, hoping it might provide more clues or allow her to see the person from her dream again. As they walked together, Letitia mentioned that something about Angie seemed different. When Angie asked what she meant, Letitia told her she looked more beautiful than ever and asked if she had a secret. Letitia teased Angie, asking if she was seeing someone without telling her. Angie quickly denied it, feeling flustered by the suggestion. Letitia, noticing Angie's reaction, teased her further, saying she looked flustered. The group was soon joined by other women, who asked if Angie and Letitia were ready to go to the sewing room. Angie greeted them, but then paused, wondering if there should be one more person with them. She mentioned that there had been an additional member in their embroidery circle, a tall woman with red hair who was always chatty. The women questioned whether Angie was sure, suggesting that she might be mixing up her memory with one of the characters from her books. Angie was certain, though, that the woman used to embroider with them. The women reminded Angie of a strange echo she had heard a few months ago in the middle of the night, suggesting that perhaps she was imagining things again. Just as the conversation was about to continue, Hester arrived and greeted the group. She looked at Angie and then told the women to go home. When one of the girls asked if something was wrong, Hester replied that Duke Blackwell had passed away that morning. Meanwhile, in the castle, Jerome stood near the Duke's body, waiting. Kai arrived and knelt beside his father. He remarked on how strange it was that his father had finally closed his eyes, yet it felt as though he had never truly been alive. Kai reflected that his mother must have seemed the same to his father, his remedy, his original sin, and the only person he ever loved. Kai was struck by these thoughts. After his mother's passing, his father had succumbed to madness, accepting any blood transfusion that was available. Kai wondered what his own fate would be, questioning whether he would be able to break the curse and reclaim a life of his own. Angie sat in a dark room, overwhelmed with grief, lamenting the sudden passing of Duke Blackwell. She had heard his condition had worsened, but she never expected his death to come so quickly. Concerned about Kai, she wondered if he was struggling with the grief on his own. Her mother entered and asked if she could come in. Angie, still in her sorrow, responded affirmatively and then inquired about her father. Her mother informed her that he had just left to assist with the funeral preparations and that they would need Angie's help too. Angie was surprised, asking what she could possibly do. Her mother explained that it would take a few days for everything to be in order, and in the meantime, they would need her assistance with some tasks, just like before. Angie, willing to help, accepted, though a part of her wondered whether this was also an opportunity to see Kai again, or if it was his way of summoning her. Her mother reassured her, stating that there was no need to worry. She explained that Duke Edward Blackwell was gone, and now they had a new Duke, Duke Kylik Blackwell. Life would continue under the grace of House Blackwell, and Angie needed to understand that. Angie nodded, still uncertain about the future. She expressed her concerns about Lord Kylik's ongoing treatment, unsure if he would ever recover. Her mother acknowledged that if his condition did not improve, he might need to seek additional treatment outside the island. Angie was shocked by this suggestion, questioning how they could leave the island given the dangerous waters filled with sharks and poisonous gases surrounding it. Her mother, though acknowledging the dangers, told her to listen carefully. She revealed that 2 or 3 times a year, the sharks migrated, and during a red full moon, it became possible to sail across the sea. The late Duke had tried to cross the sea 8 years ago to obtain medicine, but a storm forced him to return before he could find the cure. He never told anyone about the crossing, because it could have led people to make dangerous attempts to leave the island. Without understanding the moon's cycle, they could have ended up like Elliot, who had died attempting to leave. Angie was left wondering if the mainland was as dangerous as she had been led to believe. Her mother clarified that the Duke had only sought to cross out of desperation for medicine, and warned her not to entertain any foolish ideas about leaving the island. She emphasized that what she had just shared was to remain a secret, and that Angie must never tell anyone. Angie asked when the next lunar cycle might occur, but her mother explained she didn't know, adding that only long-serving attendants of House Blackwell likely had such knowledge. Her mother then instructed her to start packing, as she would need to go to Blackwell Manor as soon as the funeral was over. After her mother left, Angie was left to reflect on the strange possibility that she might one day leave the island. She prayed for the Duke's peaceful rest and for renewal and resurrection, hoping that their Lord's spirit would find peace. Standing there with her mother, Angie was told to stay where she was. She agreed but suspected that Kai would not attend the funeral, as he had always avoided appearing in front of others. As she glanced aside, she noticed a man standing nearby, and with a start, she wondered if it was Kai. When the man turned around, she asked if he had heard her. He responded with a hand gesture, asking for silence. Confused, she asked who he was, and the man with a faint smile replied, "It's been a while, Angela." It was Martin. Angie noticed how different Martin looked compared to when she had seen him outside the church, so much so that it momentarily reminded her of Kyle. Martin, noticing her reaction, commented that she didn't seem as surprised as he expected. He thought she would be caught off guard by the fact that he knew her name. Angie, confused, asked him to explain. Martin casually told her that he had heard a lot about her in passing, mentioning that she was Angela, the friendly president of Cullinan Island, known for her incredible talent in embroidery and love of reading. Angie, feeling slightly uncomfortable, asked him to simply call her Angie. Martin responded, introducing himself as Mikhail Randall, and requested that she call him by his name instead of referring to him by Lord Blackwell's title. Meanwhile, back at the manor, people were conversing, but Angie found herself outside, taking a moment to catch her breath. Mikhail joined her, asking why she was out there. She explained that she had stepped outside for a bit of fresh air. Mikhail agreed, noting that the atmosphere inside felt heavy, and he understood why she needed a break. He stood beside her for a moment in silence. Angie then mentioned that she had heard he had suffered from a long illness. Mikhail was surprised, saying he didn't think she had any interest in him. He went on to admit that it hadn't been long since he had recovered and rejoined the outside world. The air he breathed still felt unreal, much like how hard it was to believe that the Duke had passed away. Angie, with genuine concern, expressed her hope that he wouldn't suffer anymore. She told him that knowing how much pain he had endured for so long, her sincerest wish was for him to be happy from now on. Mikhail thanked her and said he was supposed to start helping out at the manor that day. He added that it was reassuring to see her there. Angie, somewhat shy, responded that she hardly knew more than he did about the duties, but Mikhail insisted that she was probably more capable than he was. Angie, lost in thought, reflected that she had missed seeing who had come for Kai earlier, but now she could tell that Mikhail had a completely different air about him. While Kai seemed like dark chess pieces, Mikhail embodied the light of the ivory ones. Mikhail then asked if she would like to go for a stroll, to which Angie agreed, saying she would like that. As they walked, Angie suddenly slipped and was about to fall, but Mikhail quickly caught her from behind. He asked if she was all right, and she thanked him for his quick reaction. Mikhail, noticing something on her arm, asked what the marks were from. Angie, confused, looked at her arm and wondered if she had gotten something on herself. Mikhail, upon closer inspection, pointed out that the marks looked like needle marks, and he mentioned he had similar marks himself. Angie was surprised and confirmed that the marks did indeed look exactly like his. She was puzzled, as she had never had an injection before and didn't know how she got them. Mikhail asked if he could take a closer look, and Angie agreed. As he examined her arm, Kai watched them from a distance. Jerome, standing beside Kai, spoke up, asking how long Angie would be there. Kai replied that she would be there for about 10 days. Jerome, noticing Kai's unease, asked if something was wrong. Kai, seemingly deep in thought, muttered that the man, referring to Mikhail, wasn't important for now. He added that it would take some time for everyone to adjust, but he was certain that the future would bring many changes. Annette, having become good friends with Angie while cleaning, told her that for the time being, they would be cleaning the library or doing some needlework. She asked if Angie would like to have breakfast together the next morning. Angie eagerly accepted, saying she would love that. Annette wished her good night, and Angie responded, saying she would see her in the morning. After the door shut and Annette left, Angie lay down on her bed. She thought to herself that she hadn't expected to have an entire room to herself. She wondered if she would see Kai that day, remembering that he had sent her a note saying he would try to visit. Angie reflected on the long day she had just experienced. First they had laid someone to rest, and then she had met someone new. She still couldn't stop wondering about the strange marks on her arm. If they were indeed from some sort of syringe, why couldn't she remember anything about it? She decided that she would ask her mother about it once she returned home. As her cold seemed to be getting better, she thought it might be a good idea to start drinking rose tea again tomorrow. That night, as Angie slept, she once again had the same dream. The man from before appeared and was calling to her. She recognized him, but couldn't recall ever telling him her name. Martin, in her dream, called out, asking if she could hear him and to respond, even if it was just a nod. He asked if she lived on Cullinan Island, to which Angie could only nod, unable to speak. Martin, appearing to have expected her answer, urged her to listen carefully. He warned her that the roses that grew on the island contained drugs, and she should avoid drinking rose tea. If she continued drinking it, her memory would start to fade, and she must try to recall who she was before coming to the island. He told her she needed to remember her true identity. Angie, desperate for answers, asked him to stay longer, but before he could respond, the dream shifted. Kai, standing by her bedside, asked if she had had a nightmare. He noticed she was drenched in cold sweat. Angie, still shaken, whispered his name. Kai confirmed it was indeed him. She asked when he had arrived, and he apologized for entering without permission, explaining that he hadn't expected her to be asleep. He mentioned he had sent her the note but had a lot of things to take care of, so he had planned to stop by briefly and catch a glimpse of her. He acknowledged that he must have startled her. Angie reassured him that it was no trouble at all, though she couldn't shake the unsettling dream she'd just had. Martin had mentioned the rose tea being drugged, and she knew she needed to investigate further. However, with Kai there, it did bring her some comfort. She offered to light a candle, but Kai gently declined, saying it was fine. He mentioned he would be leaving soon but would stay a little longer. He kissed her hand softly. Angie, concerned, asked if he was all right, expressing worry about how exhausted he must be, both physically and mentally. Kai, remembering Angie's recent encounter with Mikhail, reassured her that he was fine. He told her that it was hard to be anything but all right when someone cared for him as much as she did. Then, with a hint of seriousness, he mentioned that once his treatment was complete, there was something important he would like to talk to her about. Kai, in their previous conversation, had mentioned that he wanted to talk about their future. The next morning, Angie was drinking tea, lost in thought. She wondered to herself how Kai was so good at kissing, losing track of time, and found herself wondering what else he might be good at. She quickly scolded herself for her thoughts, but in any case, she was relieved to see that his treatment seemed to be going well. Still, she was curious about what he wanted to discuss with her. He had said it was about their future, and she couldn't help but think of one thing in particular. Suddenly, she touched the hot pot by accident and yelped in surprise. "Ow, that was hot!" she exclaimed. Then she remembered something. Martin's warning from her dream about avoiding rose tea because it was drugged. She realized Martin had started appearing in her dreams around the same time she started drinking honey tea for her cold. This made her wonder if it was more than just a coincidence. She wasn't sure whether to believe him without more proof, but decided that stopping the tea couldn't hurt. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Annette, asking if she was ready. Angie quickly responded, saying she would be right there. Several days passed, and at first, Angie felt nervous about deceiving everyone. But as time went on, her worries began to fade. She wanted to be brave, knowing that uncovering the truth would give her hope. Soon, her forgotten memories began to resurface. One afternoon, while sitting in a carriage, Angie suddenly remembered something. She muttered to herself, recalling a tall redhead girl named Lucy Perron, who used to embroider with her. None of the other girls believed her when she mentioned Lucy, as though she had vanished from their memory entirely. It was as if someone had erased all traces of her existence. When she returned home, her mother greeted her, concerned about her condition. She noticed Angie's pale face, gaunt appearance, dark circles under her eyes, and hair that seemed to be falling out. Angie admitted that something strange had been happening to her recently, prompting her mother to ask what exactly was wrong. Angie explained that she had been having a recurring dream where a man appeared, repeatedly telling her that she must leave the island. Her mother was shocked by this revelation, asking her to repeat what she had just said. Angie went on, saying at first she had dismissed it as just a dream, but now she felt a strange sense that the man was telling the truth. She wondered if it was possible that they simply didn't know much about the survivors of the war or the current state of the mainland, which might be safe by now. Her mother was alarmed by her words, saying this couldn't go on, and told Angie that she would take her to see Dr. Johnson first thing the next morning. Angie, confused, asked why, as she hadn't felt unwell. She simply wanted to tell her about her dream. Her mother, however, insisted that she should stop entertaining such absurd thoughts, blaming her reading habits for making it hard for her to distinguish between fantasy and reality. She advised Angie to stop reading for now and focus on embroidery instead. Angie, feeling silenced, didn't respond. Later that night, as Angie slept, her mother entered her room quietly. She had a bottle in hand, filled with a blue liquid. Her mother poured the liquid into the water, murmuring softly as she did so. "Angie," she said, her voice barely audible, "we are going to continue being happy on this island, forever and always. And you should know, surrendering yourself to fate is the key to that happiness." In the castle, Jerome asked Kai if he was able to sit up. Kai, rubbing his forearm, let several bottles fall to the ground. He muttered that it was finally over. Jerome, concerned, asked how Kai was feeling. Kai replied that he was not feeling too bad, though he had a slight lightheadedness. Jerome, relieved, admitted that he had been doubtful that the treatment would be effective. Kai acknowledged that while he couldn't be sure when his condition might worsen again, he could manage for now. He mentioned that he would need to invite Angie soon to tell her the news. Meanwhile, Louise, who had been listening, interjected. She firmly stated that dreams were nothing but dreams, and that the man Angie had seen was merely an illusion. Kai's mother asked if that meant the man was not an escapee. Louise confirmed that everyone who had tried to leave the island had been captured and dealt with. Some had been lost at sea, but there was no chance they survived. She said that if Angie had started drinking the rose tea again, there should be no further issues. However, Louise asked if the only reason Angie had stopped drinking the tea was because of her cold, or if there had been another reason. Kai's mother responded that it had been the cold that made Angie stop drinking the tea, as honey tea had seemed to help with her illness. She assured Louise that they would be more careful moving forward. Louise then offered to provide more sedatives, which they could mix with water to ensure Angie slept soundly without any dreams. Kai's mother thanked Louise. At this point, Kai's father asked if that meant Angie would be all right. He mentioned that Lord Kylik had ruled Angie out as a remedy before starting his treatment. Louise confirmed that was true, and nobody had been able to persuade Lord Kylik otherwise. Kai's father, still worried, asked if Angie's safety was assured. He acknowledged that Angie's blood had been an exceptional gift for Lord Kylik, but hoped they could find a different remedy. Louise responded by noting that the couple had grown quite attached to Angie, almost as if they thought of themselves as her real parents. Kai's mother, touched, confessed that she had come to cherish Angie over the years. She said there was no one in the world quite as bright and lovely as Angie. Louise reassured them that there was nothing to fear. She explained that Master Kylik wished for Angie to be well, and if there was any issue with her memory again, they could simply proceed with the next step. This would involve using an amnesiac to reset her memories. In the market, a man was reading a newspaper in front of a house. Someone mentioned that Martin had come by. The man reading the newspaper was Wilhelm van Ametige, the founder of Ametige Steel Company. Martin, approaching, greeted him, saying it had been a while since they last met. Wilhelm agreed and invited Martin to sit down. Martin, requesting a merchant ship to sail to the island, explained that he only needed a sailboat as a disguise. He recalled that, from what he remembered, the island was not too far away and that a boat could likely reach it in less than a week. Wilhelm assured Martin that procuring a boat would not be difficult. However, he expressed concern about Martin's safety, asking if he would be all right should something happen. Martin reassured him, saying that as long as he didn't enter the island, nothing dangerous would occur. Wilhelm, trusting Martin, asked if he truly believed he would be able to locate the girl from his dream. Martin admitted that he couldn't be certain, but insisted that he wanted to check for himself. He added that he couldn't afford to ignore the victims. A man looking at Martin remarked that it had been a long time since he had seen that particular look in his eyes. Martin, his voice tense, responded that he had been a victim as well. He explained that he had been abducted and taken to the island against his will, and believed there must be countless other children who had suffered the same fate, just like the man's daughter. The man, clearly confused, asked if Martin realized what he was saying, accusing Duke Blackwell of forcefully taking children to the island and manipulating their memories through drug addiction. He scoffed at the idea, calling it utter nonsense. The man expressed deep gratitude for Martin rescuing his daughter at the risk of his own life. However, he insisted that his daughter had merely been lost and wandering around when she attracted the attention of some petty criminals. He reminded Martin that House Blackwell was a collateral line of the tri-state royal family, the most powerful family across the continent. He felt no ill will toward the Duke, and despite being the richest man in the Winter Guard, his health was nothing compared to the Duke's. The man questioned where Martin had picked up such strange ideas, but advised him to stop talking about it. Since Martin had saved his daughter, he promised to reward him generously. Martin, however, insisted that the Duke's modus operandi was to target orphans, children who wouldn't be missed if they disappeared, and transport them to the island as sacrifices. He reminded the man that his daughter, when she had been found, had been disheveled and could easily have been mistaken for an orphan. Martin refused any reward, asking instead that the man use the money for the good of the country's children, to ensure they wouldn't be left vulnerable like he had been, and to prevent them from being dragged to the island. The man, still skeptical, asked why House Blackwell would have established such a secretive organization if it was just about land for drug cultivation. He reasoned that an estate on the mainland would have been a safer choice, and that they could have found much stronger manpower than children if they needed labor. Martin, unperturbed, asked if the man had ever heard of a dark ritual called eternity. The man, bewildered, asked what Martin meant. Martin explained that around 10 years ago, House Blackwell had begun practicing this forbidden ritual, which required the flesh and blood of children to obtain something humans should never covet. Mikhail was admiring a handkerchief Angie had made for him. He expressed that it was marvelous, though he suspected it wasn't just for him. He mentioned that it was the first time Angie had asked to meet, and also the first time she had given him a gift, which gave him hope. Angie, sensing his disappointment, thought to herself that she hadn't realized Mikhail was like this. He then pointed out that the spelling of his name wasn't quite right on the handkerchief. Angie, surprised, asked if it wasn't spelled Mikhail. Mikhail clarified that it was pronounced the same, but spelled Mikhail. Angie, apologizing for the mistake, offered to make a new one, but Mikhail insisted it was fine, as long as she now knew the correct spelling. He then asked if Angie was finished with her work for the manor, mentioning that he planned to stay a while longer. Angie nodded, saying she believed there was nothing left for her to do. She recalled what her mother had told her earlier and thought that since that day, she had just been staying at home embroidering. For some reason, Martin had stopped appearing in her dreams, and she had stopped drinking rose tea, suspecting there were things she didn't know about it. In another part of the manor, Louise mentioned that Master Kylik's succession ceremony would be held soon, most likely within a few months now that his treatment was complete. A woman, covered, asked if that meant he would be going to the mainland. Louise confirmed that Kylik would need to attend an audience with His Majesty. Haster, concerned, asked about Mikhail. Louise reassured him, saying she had matters well in hand. She explained that first, they would need to find a new remedy for Master Kylik. They must be prepared for any unforeseen circumstances. While Angie's blood was the most compatible, there was little they could do, given how adamant Kylik was about the matter. Louise suggested they also look for a suitable child, one befitting of the station. Father asked if Angie was sleeping, to which Mother confirmed she was. However, she expressed her discomfort with the idea of continuing to drug Angie. She mentioned it didn't feel right to her. Father, however, urged her to remain resolute, reminding her of what Louise had said. He believed there was no reason for them to worry now, as long as things didn't escalate to the point where they'd need to take further steps. Mother, still uneasy, agreed but also noted something that had been troubling her. She mentioned how Angie seemed to hold a special place in Master Kylik's heart, beyond just her role as his companion and maid. She recalled the gift that had arrived for Angie earlier that afternoon. Lord Kylik had said it was to thank Angie for her hard work, but she had never heard of him sending such a gift to anyone else. She observed Angie's reaction to the gift, noting the bashful smile on her face and how thrilled she was that her embroidery had been used in the dress. Father, acknowledging his wife's concerns, agreed that she was right but also pointed out that there was little they could do. He explained it was simply the fleeting passion of youth. He believed Master Kylik, given the heavy burden on his shoulders, would not make any reckless decisions. At that moment, Angie, who had been listening from a distance, silently questioned what she had just overheard. Since returning home, Angie had been falling asleep quickly after drinking water before bedtime. At first, she had wanted to believe it was a side effect of not drinking the rose tea. But when she found the note hidden inside the box that the dress had come in, her suspicions grew. The note read, "Dear Angie, my treatment is finally complete. Please come meet me tonight. Wearing this dress. 0. Mineville be waiting for you at the entrance to the forest." The note left Angie with a sense of urgency and dread. She had a strong feeling that tonight she shouldn't drink the water her mother had given her. So Angie pretended to fall asleep instead. After changing into the dress, she ran out into the dark night, her mind racing with questions. She wondered why her mother had drugged her. Was it because she had told her about Martin appearing in her dreams, or because she feared her relationship with Kylik might become more serious? What exactly had she put in her water? And what did she mean by second step? Angie found it hard to think clearly, overwhelmed by the many things she still didn't understand. She began to worry that everything she knew so far was just the tip of the iceberg. As Angie ran through the woods, Jerome appeared, calling out to her. He asked if she had run all the way there, assuring her that she still had plenty of time. Angie, her face pale, responded that she wanted to see Lord Kylik immediately. She added that even if it was only for a brief moment, she wanted to surrender her worries in his arms. Arriving at the door, Angie was about to push it open when it swung open and Kylek appeared. She flinched, surprised by his sudden appearance. Kylek greeted her, saying she had made it. Angie, relieved to see him looking well, asked if he was completely cured now and whether that meant he wouldn't have to suffer anymore. Kylek confirmed he was all better and complimented her on the dress, mentioning that he had had it specially made. He asked if she recognized the lace with the marigolds. Angie's eyes widened in recognition. She said she did recognize it, revealing that she was the one who had made it. She had never imagined, while crafting lace at the manor, that it would end up as part of her dress. Kylek then told her he wanted to give her something meaningful. Angie, touched, thanked him. He insisted, however, that she call him Kai, explaining that only she could call him that. Angie, caught up in the moment, thought to herself, wondering if Kylek was aware of everything that was happening around them. Did he even know what people thought of them? Was he oblivious to the secrets hidden in the land? She hesitated, unsure if she could accept such a generous gift. Kylek, sensing her hesitation, reassured her. He told her she deserved everything and more. He explained that he had been waiting for his treatment to be completed so that he could tell her that, and he asked if she would allow him the honor of holding her in his arms tonight. Kai had removed all Angie's cloths, and he was over her, as he was about to remove more of her cloths. Kai told Angie not to be afraid and that she could push him away whenever she wanted. He expressed his desire to share himself completely with her. Angie thought to herself that she felt the same way and longed to touch him. Though there were many things she should be thinking about, she couldn't hold back any longer, at least in that moment. She just wanted to feel his warmth. He kissed her hands, and then he told her she would never know how long he had waited for that moment. After that night, they had been together repeatedly, thirsting for more. It seemed impossible to stop. Angie thought about how sweet his scent, the warmth of his body, and his breath were. She also thought about how the more they shared with each other, the stronger their longing became. Endless nights passed as they recovered each other's eyes and ears, submerging themselves in an ecstatic abyss. Outside the room, Martin stood, hearing every sound coming from within. He could sense Angie's grief as she accepted her gift. Angie remarked on how amazing the air felt, and Kai responded that it did indeed feel good. He asked if she needed him to carry her, but she assured him she was perfectly all right. He asked again if she was sure, and she replied that she was, though she still felt drained. Angie also noticed that Kai seemed to have become more sly than before. He grabbed her from behind and suggested they take a leisurely stroll, saying there was something he wanted to show her. Angie agreed. As they walked, Angie exclaimed in awe over the fireflies, and Kai asked what she thought. They had arrived at a seashore under the night sky. Angie marveled at how beautiful it was, calling it the most breathtaking scenery she had ever seen. Kai explained that his father had often visited this place with his mother before they were married. He added that she was the first person he had brought here since then. He reminded her of what he had said earlier about wanting to talk to her once his treatment was over. Kai mentioned that there was something he wanted to discuss concerning their future and began to say her name. As the wind cut through the tranquil forest, Angie's mind was filled with sudden thoughts. She had been mentally ignoring the unknown secrets and her growing sense of unease. No one had taken her seriously up until now, but she thought maybe, just maybe, someone might listen and believe her without doubting. Kai told Angie that he used to observe her from that very spot sometimes. Angie, taken aback, asked him to clarify, expressing confusion. Kai explained that he had heard that on the days Angie didn't visit him, she would help her parents with their work in the cottage down the hill. Angie, realizing what he meant, thought to herself that the cottage was at the North Shore. She hadn't realized that these cliffs led to the Blackwell Manor. Kai continued, revealing that it was during those times that his feelings had started to grow. He said that maybe it was even before that, but whenever he looked at her sweet face, it made him feel alive. He added that he wanted to share this joy with her. He then asked Angie if she would go to the mainland with him. Angie was confused and asked him what he meant, saying that the mainland was still unsafe. Kai reassured her, saying that he knew she had been told there was toxic gas on the mainland, but that it was all false. He explained that there were countless people building new lives there. His succession ceremony would soon be held there, and once he received his title, he planned to settle in the capital. He told her there were many things he had been waiting to tell her, but had to wait until his treatment was over. Now, he could share everything with her, one thing at a time. He promised that everything he had neglected to do until now, he would set right. And when that time came, he hoped she would be by his side. Meanwhile, on the shore, a few men were wandering about. A girl ran into an embroidery group, asking if they had heard the news. The other girls had heard the news, which was about a naval ship washing up on their shore. The captain of the ship was said to have met Lord Kylek that day. The captain confirmed it, saying it was a miracle they were swept away from a storm and found themselves on the island, the very place they had been searching for. He explained that the waters around the island had been considered impossible to navigate due to the thick fog, which must be why the island had remained safe until now. He believed it was divine providence. One of the girls reported that the captain had said the world beyond Cullinan Island was safe now, though they still needed to observe the situation for a few more years. It was amazing news, especially since they had thought they would be stuck on the island forever. Angie overheard everything, and now knew about it. She reflected on how just last night, it had felt like an impossible dream. Kai had given her time to think about it, and he would be waiting for her. Angie thought to herself that it was a strange coincidence, almost as if it were fate. At least now, one thing was clear. Everything Martin had said was true. This meant Martin really did exist somewhere off the island, and it also made it more likely that what he said about the rose tea was true as well. She realized she hadn't been able to see him in her dreams because of the effects of the new drug. She wished she could find out more. It wasn't just that she wanted answers, but she wanted to help Kai as much as she could. He had been ill for so long that he probably didn't know much about what was really happening on the island. Angie then noticed Letica biting her thumb. She asked Letica if she was feeling all right because she looked pale. Letica replied by asking Angie if she had ever met Lord Kylek before. Angie asked Letitia what she meant by her statement. Letitia replied, stating that Angie probably wouldn't have had any reason to search, as such opportunities were rare. Angie, confused and unable to understand why Letitia had suddenly brought up Kai, thought to herself that she couldn't bring herself to ask Letitia about it. She had never seen Letitia look so frightened before. Angie offered Letitia her help, saying that if she ever needed it, she should let her know, no matter what it involved. Letitia thanked Angie, expressing that Angie was the person she cherished most in the world. Angie, reflecting on Letitia's words, realized, though too late, that she had made a huge mistake in that moment. Meanwhile, Kai was speaking to Jerome. He said that sometimes he found himself picturing the look in his mother's eyes when she gazed at his father amid the raging flames on the day she learned the whole truth. Kai thought about the words she would have exclaimed, her face so pale that not a single drop of blood remained. He said that his father genuinely loved his mother, but realized it too late. Kai explained that perhaps that was why he was so determined to avoid making any decisions that he would come to regret. He added that since Jerome was a devoted servant to his father, he wouldn't hold it against him if he chose to walk a different path. However, if Jerome stood in his way, he would suffer the consequences. Kai asked if Jerome understood. Jerome respectfully replied that he respected both Kai's wishes and those of his father, and that he would fully comply. Louise, who had been listening to their conversation, thought to himself that this situation wouldn't end well if it continued like this. He considered that it might be best if he took action first. As Louise walked away, Mikhail came out of a room and overheard everything as well. A fortnight later, the girls were talking about how splendid the Duke Manor looked. Angie was being called by the girls. The official announcement for Kai's succession ceremony was made. He was set to depart for the mainland with noble officers to receive his title. A 3-day banquet was organized for the residents of the island before his journey. Surprisingly, people didn't seem afraid of the mainland. Instead, they were intrigued by the idea of an unknown world. There was also tremendous anticipation surrounding the opportunity to finally see the face of the Duke, who had remained shrouded in mystery. It seemed as though everyone had been trying to suppress their curiosity about Kai and the mainland until now, as that was what was expected of them. It had probably been in Kai's eyes for a long time. Jerome approached Angie and called her name. Angie, surprised, asked if Kai wanted to see her. Jerome confirmed and asked if Angie would mind coming with him for a moment. Angie, eager to see Kai, said she would be right back and told her friends she would return soon. As Angie walked behind Jerome, Harold Durbin arrived with Letitia. Harold spoke to Letitia, reminding her that she needed to be prepared. He warned her that any mistake, no matter how small, would not be tolerated, as the future of their family was on her shoulders. Louise welcomed Harold, saying he had been waiting for him. Harold greeted Louise with a good evening, asking if they would be going straight to Lord Kylik. Louise replied that today they would begin by discussing a few matters with him first. Harold, following Louise, asked why she was just standing there looking like a fool and instructed her to follow him at once. Letitia, without hesitation, started following her father. Meanwhile, Jerome called Angie and said, "This way, Angie." Angie, unsure, asked, "This is—" As they reached their destination, Angie saw Kai standing there looking at her. Kai reassured her, saying that she could relax because no one could enter the place. He hugged Angie tightly, saying, "I missed you." Angie, feeling a little uneasy, asked if he was sure he had time to see her, as he must be very busy. Kai responded that nothing interested him more than being with her. Angie, holding his hands, confessed that she had thought a lot about what he said that day on the cliff with the fireflies around them. She admitted she would be lying if she said she wasn't afraid. Yet the idea occurred to her that long before Kai mentioned the mainland to her, even before she met Martin, she might have already been anticipating this moment, the moment she would step foot in the outside world, beyond the island. She said that when she heard Kai's words, the first emotion that surged within her was excitement. If she could go there with him, if the opportunity presented itself, she would like to go. Kai, listening closely, seemed moved by her words and responded, "Angie, it does weigh on my mind that I will have to leave my parents and friends behind. But don't worry, it may take some time, but I will make sure that the people you love will eventually be able to settle in the capital." Angie, touched by his words, asked, "Really?" Kai, nodding, then asked if it was his turn to speak. Angie, curious, asked, "What is it?" Kai explained that he wanted to give her something, a sacred jewel known as the Sacred Tears. It had been passed down through generations of women in his family. His father had given it to his mother, and now Kai wanted to give it to her. Angie hesitated, saying she wasn't sure if she could accept it. Kai, with certainty, responded that there was no one else he would give it to. He had originally intended to give her a necklace and a ring, but tradition dictated that they exchange them upon making their vows. Angie, still unsure, replied, "Kai, are you sure? I have nothing to my name, and there's so little I can offer you. You are from House Blackwell, a collateral line of the imperial family, while I'm just me." At that moment, Jerome arrived and interrupted, apologizing for the intrusion, but saying it was time for Kai to go. Kai, realizing he had lost track of time, turned to Angie and told her to read the letter he had left for her. He said everything he wanted to tell her was written inside, and it should have all the answers she needed. He kissed her on the forehead, saying, "I'll be in touch soon. By then, we'll need to start preparing to leave this island." After Kai left, Angie took the letter and slipped it into her pocket. She thought to herself, "My heart is still racing. Whenever I'm with Kai, it feels like I'm walking on clouds." Suddenly, Mikhail came running, calling for Angie. "You're here. There's no time to waste. You need to go at once." Angie, confused, asked, "What are you talking about?" Mikhail, with urgency in his voice, told her that her friends seemed to be in trouble. As they arrived, they found Letitia lying on the ground. Mikhail told Angie that her friend Letitia seemed to be in trouble. Angie, rushing over, asked, "Letitia, are you all right? I thought you said you wouldn't be able to attend tonight's banquet." As Angie was about to touch Letitia, the girl slapped her hands away. Letitia, looking frustrated, asked, "Why? Why did you lie to me? I asked you if you had ever met Lord Kylik before." Angie, in a daze, remembered Letitia's earlier question and realized the significance of the moment. She asked, "Are you here to see Lord Kylik?" Letitia, in distress, replied, "You don't know anything. You have no idea how much I wanted to run away." Letitia hesitated, admitting she was scared, saying, "Father, I am feeling hesitant about this. I don't want to see Lord Kylik. Everyone says his face is as grotesque as a monster. Is it too late to reconsider?" Harold, hearing this, shouted, "Letitia, what the devil are you—" Louise, cutting in, said, "Don't be absurd. Your friend Angie willingly took on this role before you." Letitia, shocked, responded, "Pardon? What is Lord Kylik like? I doubt you'll answer me now after all those years of keeping it a secret from me. Get away from me. I don't want to see you right now." Angie tried to intervene, saying, "But Letitia," her voice shaky, demanded, "Go away." As the tension mounted, the letter that Angie had been holding slipped from her pocket and fell to the floor. Mikhail, observing the situation, quietly said, "Angie, I think you should come with me. Your friend will take care of Letitia, so there's no need to worry." Reluctantly, Angie followed Mikhail, but she couldn't shake the feeling that leaving Letitia alone was wrong. Mikhail, in silence, slipped the letter into his jacket as they walked away. The next morning, in Angie's room, her mother asked, "Are you feeling better, Angie? Your fever just won't seem to come down. I can't believe you've fallen so sick in the middle of summer." After the banquet, Angie had made several attempts to see Letitia, but each time she was refused. In fact, Letitia refused to see anyone, and Angie had ended up losing the letter Kai had given her. She was feeling foolish and distressed. Her father asked, "How is Angie doing?" Her mother replied, "She's better, but we will need to keep an eye on her." Her father then mentioned, "Yes, the medications Dr. Johnson prescribed seem to be working. However, it seems animal carcasses have been turning up near the woods again." Her mother, concerned, asked, "Have they been found near the North Shore as well?" "It's been a month since the last incident." Her father, lowering his voice, said, "Have you heard the news about Letitia? I happened to overhear while I was in the chapel. She will soon be engaged to Lord Kylik." Her mother gasped, "Oh my!" Angie, overhearing this conversation, flinched in shock. "What?" she exclaimed, sitting up on her bed. "What do you mean by that? Letitia and Lord Kylik are to be engaged." Angie questions her father with unease, asking if the news is truly correct. She wonders if the Blackwell house has officially announced it and if Lord Kylik is aware. Overcome with fear, Angie faints, and both her mother and father rush to her side. Martin, meanwhile, arrives at his grandmother Catherine's home by carriage. Catherine greets him warmly, calling him Philip, which strikes Martin as strange. He mentions that he hasn't used that name in years. Catherine is puzzled by his reaction, reminding him that Philip is his real name. Martin reflects on the years he spent avoiding it. Soon, Bryn joins them, introducing herself as Bryn and asking Catherine if she remembers her. Catherine appears confused, recalling a Brihanna, the daughter of a local store owner, but Martin clarifies that Brihanna is his fiancée and he's brought her to visit several times. Martin grows concerned as he notices his grandmother's memory seems increasingly unclear. He reassures her that he will visit more frequently from now on, as will Bryn. Martin offers to help with Catherine's chores, and as he cleans, he reflects on how surreal it feels to experience simple joys like this. 9 years ago, he had fled the island, leading a wandering life. It was during this time that he met Bryn, and something about her compelled him to protect her. Together, they left behind their dark pasts and started anew with the help of Wilhelm. Martin eventually found his long-lost grandmother and revealed his true name, Philip. As Martin continues to clean, he notices an old photo on the wall. Catherine explains that this is the only surviving photo of Philip's twin sister, Amber. She shares that the others were burned during the war. Martin is startled to learn that he had a sister, something he didn't know. Catherine explains that Amber was a joyful little girl with eyes just like his. She recalls that the two of them used to sing a song from their hometown together. Martin's memory is triggered. He remembers the song. As the sun sets over the sea kissed by rain and wind, stars silently shimmer, and the crescent moon glows. Yes, it is your lovely eyes that outshine them all. He recalls a moment from his childhood when Amber was singing the song. She had proudly claimed to have learned all the words. Martin had promised to teach her a new song next time, and Amber had eagerly accepted, insisting he couldn't back out on his promise. Finally, Martin realizes that it was Angie who had been linked to those memories. Bryn notices Martin's sudden shift in demeanor and asks if something is wrong. Martin reveals that everything has just come rushing back to him. Meanwhile, in the castle, Mikhail expresses his impatience, asking how much longer he has to wait. He wonders if things are coming to a close soon. Hester, who is nearby, notes that Mikhail still hasn't broken his bad habit. Mikhail, with blood on his shirt, responds, accusing Hester of dodging the question. He explains that he had been lying low and feigning illness for years, waiting for Duke Blackwell's death. He suggests it's time to reveal the truth. Hester, unfazed, mentions that she spoke to Mrs. Dunst recently. She tells Mikhail that Mrs. Dunst has plans for Lord Kylik's engagement ceremony, and orders may be issued soon. She advises him to wait until then. Outside, Angie is seen dressed in black. Martin notices her and decides to leave, asking to be briefed on the rest of the situation when they meet again. Hester warns Mikhail that his instincts might lead him into serious trouble. Martin approaches Angie, asking if she is all right, having heard that she's been ill for a while. Angie explains that while her fever has subsided, she still feels weak. She confesses that she hasn't heard from Letitia since that night, and it's difficult for her to believe that everything Kylik had said to her, his reassurances, his promises, were lies. She wants to believe there must be something beyond his control, but it's hard for her to convince herself. Martin, offering comfort, tells Angie that if he were in Kylik's place, he would never leave her side. He promises to be there for her whenever she needs warmth or support. Angie, confused, asks Mikhail what he means by that. Mikhail, looking at her earnestly, reassures her that he can ease her loneliness, no matter what happens. Angie, now uncertain, wonders if Mikhail's words imply that he has feelings for her. Just as she's contemplating this, Kylik appears unexpectedly. He questions Mikhail's audacity in saying such things, accusing him of thinking himself worthy of taking Kylik's place. Kylik issues a stern warning to Mikhail, declaring that it's the first and last time he'll warn him. He is not to appear before Angie again. Mikhail confronts Kylik, accusing him of being dangerous and misleading an innocent girl for all this time. Kylik, furious, begins to respond, but Angie, frightened, steps in between them to stop the confrontation. She warns Kylik that if someone were to witness their behavior, it would be problematic, especially since he hasn't yet formally introduced himself to the people of Cullinan Island. Kylik, avoiding further conflict, takes Angie with him. He firmly tells her to come with him. As they leave, Angie looks back at Mikhail, apologizing and urging him to return home safely. Later, in the carriage, Kylik asks Angie why she didn't come to their meeting spot, revealing that he had waited for her every night. Angie, confused, asks about the meeting spot. Kylik then asks if she didn't read his letter. Angie replies that she lost it the night he gave it to her. Kylik, understanding the situation, acknowledges that there must have been a misunderstanding. He offers to explain, but Angie, with a heavy heart, questions if it will change the fact that he is engaged to Letitia. Kylik, stunned by her response, can barely find the words. Angie continues, explaining that everything she had heard in the rumors was true. She speaks about the engagement ceremony and how it seems like everyone, except her, is happy about the arrangements. She feels as though the time they spent together was being invalidated, and that eventually, even her existence will be overshadowed. She adds that she will return the family brooch to him soon, as it is meant for the future Duchess. Kylik, shocked and distressed, exclaims that the brooch belongs to her, not Letitia. He insists that he does not love Letitia Durbin, and that the engagement is merely a marriage of convenience. He explains that there have been too many eyes on them recently, and suggests they should go to the capital. Angie, pulling her hand away from him, accuses Kylik of suggesting she become his mistress while working as a maid in his manor in the capital. Kylik urgently denies this, assuring her that he would never allow such a thing. He promises that she will have her own residence in the capital, far from the Blackwell family, and no one will harm her. He tries to explain the reason for the engagement, but Angie interrupts him. She tells him coldly that had she known all of this beforehand, she would never have gotten involved with him. She would have done everything in her power to avoid falling for him, and even if she had, she would have hidden her feelings. Kylek is left speechless, shocked by her words. Angie states that she will take her leave now. Kylek, desperate, calls her name, but just then, Jerome appears, locking the door from outside. Angie, confused, asks, "Jerome?" Kylek, regretful but resolute, says that he cannot allow her to leave yet. There is still much they need to discuss. Angie, disoriented, asks Kylek what he is doing, but soon fades away. Jerome, apologizing, freezes in shock when he notices Angie lying in Kylek's lap. Kylek, sensing danger, asks if anyone has discovered their carriage. He insists they must return to the manor immediately. Meanwhile, Martin discusses their options with the captain. Martin wonders aloud if they should simply locate the island and approach it. The captain agrees that this is the current goal. Martin, concerned about the approaching storm, feels that the task might be difficult, but he cannot afford to miss the opportunity. The captain proposes they set sail before the storm hits, anchor at a nearby rocky isle, and search for the island as soon as the fog clears. Martin confidently agrees, assuring the captain that the storm won't be an issue. In his mind, he vows to find Angie. Suddenly, Angie wakes up, confused, and wonders aloud where she is. She remembers Martin saying he was coming to find her. Kylek, sitting beside her, asks if she is awake. Angie, still groggy, recognizes him. She asks how he managed to get her there. Kylek apologizes, explaining that it was the best he could do. He reassures her that she is safe here, as there are many people watching her who wish her harm. Angie, however, insists that she wants to go home. She believes the only solution is to avoid being associated with him. Kylek is confused, stating that the people after him wish to prevent him from becoming a hindrance to her. But Angie is firm in her decision, stating that she won't change her mind no matter what he says. She wants to stay on the island and live her life with her parents as she always has. She urges Kylek to go to the capital and fulfill his duties, including his succession, engagement ceremony, and marriage. Kylek, desperate, apologizes, but he tells her it's too late. He believes it was too late from the moment they confirmed their feelings for each other, or perhaps from the moment she set foot in his life. He begs her not to abandon him, and with that, he closes the door. Angie, feeling a mix of confusion and fear, is left shaken. Later, Mikhail learns from Angie's mother that Angie had been summoned urgently the previous night to assist at the annex of Blackwell Manor. Mikhail, hearing about it from Jerome after the fact, thanks her mother for the information and decides to go see Angie himself. Angie sits on the bed feeling sad and depressed. The rain falls outside, but inside time seems to blur as she questions how long she's been there. Kylek comes in every night, silently watching her, and she can see the longing in his eyes. She knows he's waiting for a response she cannot give. She had tried to resist her emotions, but it was futile. At one point, she even tried to end it all, but Kylek stopped her, his head buried against her for a long time, seemingly crying silently. Kylek, his voice heavy with emotion, confides in her about his family's dark past. He tells her that his mother was a sacrificial lamb to a curse created by his grandfather, a curse so vile that it defies imagination. His grandfather called it the sublime miracle, and after witnessing its destructive power, Kylek's father chose to hide it from his mother. Kylek's mother, Eugenia, had discovered the truth and confronted his father, demanding to know how such heinous things could be done. His father, overwhelmed by guilt, had tried to explain, but Eugenia was unforgiving. She declared that she would never forgive him, not even in death. Kylek's father lived with that regret for the rest of his days, and Kylek grew up seeing the weight of that burden. He then tells Angie that he never wants to experience the same regret his father did. Kylek, noticing Angie's injection marks, speaks again, this time more urgently. He vows not to let the salvation she has given him go to waste. He pleads with her to stay strong and asks that food be prepared for her, something easy to swallow, along with warm water and milk. A maid enters, acknowledging his request, and soon after Louise arrives. Louise comments on how Kylek has brought Angie here, asking if it was his decision. Kylek explains that he had no choice. If anyone had tried to harm Angie, he couldn't allow it. Louise questions who would dare to do such a thing, but Kylek suggests it could be the fanatic behavior of someone like Kylam who wants a remedy, or a member of the household staff who sees Angie as a threat. Kylek reassures Louise that once the storm subsides, he will leave the island and proceed with the engagement plans, but only on one condition. If there are any vials of amnesiac in the manor, they must be destroyed. Louise, surprised, asks why it must be Angie, and Kylek responds, explaining that Angie was chosen after much deliberation because of her vitality. He reminds Louise that he was convinced she would be his ideal match, as she was convinced too. The reason for all of this, Kylek says, was because of the potential change Angie could bring. As they speak, Mikhail is standing nearby, listening to their conversation. In Kylek's room, Angie is feeling weak and dizzy. She wonders aloud if it's because she hasn't eaten, feeling nauseous and about to vomit, though she covers her mouth with her hand. As she sits there, she begins to think about when her last period was, realizing she might be late. A knock on the door interrupts her thoughts. Angie, weakly, calls out, asking who it is. She expects it to be someone bringing her food, leaving it by her bedside. However, when the door opens, she hears Mikhail's voice calling her name. She's startled and asks herself, "Mikhail." Angie was shocked when Mikhail arrived and asked how he had found her. He explained that Annette had informed him she was locked up and inquired whether Kylek had the keys to the handcuffs. Angie directed him to the table where the keys were. After taking them, Mikhail told Angie that there was an issue with the vessels heading to the mainland, which needed his immediate attention. As Mikhail unlocked the handcuffs, Angie appeared too scared to leave. Mikhail reassured her, saying there wasn't much time and that they needed to leave now. He offered to discuss things later, but Angie hesitated. She asked him if he expected her to leave, and he confirmed it. After a brief pause, Angie said she did want to leave and needed to, and they both quickly sprinted through the hallways in their haste to escape. Once they were outside, Angie told Mikhail that she could manage on her own from that point and suggested that he return to the manor. She explained that if she went through the forest, the North Shore wasn't far off, and once her parents arrived, she would be safe. Mikhail insisted on walking her there, pointing out that it was his day off and she was struggling to keep her balance. Angie accepted his help and thanked him. Mikhail said he was happy to assist and added that there was something he needed to tell her once they reached the North Shore. When they arrived at the North Shore, Mikhail built a fire and began preparing tea for Angie. She asked him if he was sure he didn't need to leave, to which he reassured her that everyone was currently preoccupied with the issues surrounding the ship. He then asked how long she had been locked up. Angie replied that she wasn't sure, but it had been around 4 or 5 days. Mikhail surmised that it must have started that same night. Angie explained that Lord Kylek had wanted to take her to the capital, but she had refused, which was why she had ended up locked away. Mikhail asked her what her plans were now, noting that Kylek wouldn't give up easily. Angie said that she intended to tell her parents everything once they arrived. She pointed out that even though Kylek owned most of the island and House Blackwell controlled the residents, if her parents decided she was to stay, Kylek wouldn't be able to do anything about it. She added that she didn't believe Kylek would want to disturb the peace of the village. Mikhail, however, warned her that Cullinan Island and its inhabitants weren't as peaceful as she thought. He explained that they had tried to make the place seem like a paradise, but the strange happenings surrounding her were connected to something darker: the Black Mass. He reminded her that House Blackwell had gathered all the displaced survivors from the war, but that this had been planned from the beginning, as those people were actually monsters trained by curses. Angie was bewildered and asked Mikhail to explain what he meant by Black Mass monsters. Mikhail told her that he had overheard Mrs. Dunst and her close associates discussing the situation. According to them, miners on the island, like Angie and Mikhail, were referred to as remedies, while the rest were called helpers, working for House Blackwell. He assured her that he was about to tell her the truth and asked her to believe what he was about to say. Angie was stunned and asked if Mikhail was suggesting that the Black Mass ritual called Eternity had been occurring since the time of the previous Duke, and that a remedy must be sacrificed for the ritual. Mikhail confirmed, explaining that the remedies were used in the Eternity ritual as a form of treatment, all for the purpose of achieving immortality and eternal life. Angie found it hard to believe, but something in her began to make sense. She recalled what she had heard in chapel and from her mother, and the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Then she asked Mikhail about the drug in the rose tea, which he had previously mentioned. Mikhail confirmed that the drug was called opium rose, and that long-term consumption caused gradual memory loss. However, it seemed that adults working as helpers had developed a resistance to it, which is why it had no effect on them. Angie asked how the remedies were sacrificed, wondering aloud if they were all okay. She questioned whether the friends she had grown close to, who attended services with her, were in any danger. Mikhail asked her if that was really what she believed, and showed her the injection marks on his own body. He reminded her that they were both in the same position, but had lost their memories of it. Angie reached out and touched the marks, realizing the truth in his words. She then recalled her friends who had disappeared, asking what would happen to them once they outlived their usefulness as remedies. Mikhail said he didn't know, but he suspected they might be cast off the island after losing their memories. He was convinced that the people of House Blackwell knew how to leave the island, but had been preventing others from doing so in order to keep the island isolated. Angie mentioned the mysterious sharks and fish that had killed Elliot, but Mikhail dismissed it as a lie fabricated by House Blackwell. He explained that someone had been keeping watch at the wind, and that person had killed Elliot before mutilating his body. Angie was horrified, asking how anyone could commit such a cruel act. Mikhail responded that the people in House Blackwell were cruel and heinous beyond imagination, and that they had only one option. They needed to go to the capital together. He warned Angie that this might be her last opportunity to escape. Angie hesitated, wondering what would happen if they went to the capital and Lord Kylek was there. She realized that Mikhail might be right, that Kylek must know everything, but she also felt conflicted. Mikhail asked if she was okay and reassured her that if she was worried about her parents, she could make it a condition that they would only leave if they accompanied her. Once in the capital, she could find an opportunity to go far away, perhaps crossing the border to Vintgar or Vincentine. Angie asked when the ship was set to sail. Mikhail told her that it was supposed to leave as soon as the storm passed, but there were minor issues with the vessels, so the departure would probably be delayed by a few days. He suggested that Angie prepare to leave and try to persuade her parents. If she told them it was Kylek's order, they would surely agree. Angie agreed, but insisted that she intended to keep their conversation a secret from her parents. She explained that she believed her parents were being used by the people of House Blackwell, and she didn't want to shock them with the truth. Mikhail agreed, suggesting that she could always tell them once they were safely in the capital. At that moment, a loud clap of thunder interrupted them. Outside, they heard the sounds of the ship in the water and voices shouting, "This way! We need more people on the deck." The captain, Martin, was heard asking the first mate if he was all right, to which Martin responded that he wasn't sick yet, but he was concerned about the captain. The captain assured him that he had induced forward movement and that this was nothing compared to what they had already been through. He encouraged Martin to hold out a little longer, saying that once the heavy rain stopped, they would be able to find the island. Martin prayed for Angie's safety, silently hoping that she would be protected until they could reach her. Angie's parents arrived, and her mother was the first to speak, asking what they were doing there. Mikhail greeted Mrs. Risdell politely and explained that Angie had finished her embroidery the day before, and since it was raining heavily, they had decided to wait for her here. Her mother looked at Angie with concern, noticing how gaunt her face looked, and asked if she had been overworking herself. Angie hugged her mother tightly in response, and her mother expressed sympathy, saying Angie must have had a rough time. Her father, bringing some homemade soup, suggested that Angie eat before going to bed. He also offered some to Martin, who thanked him but declined, explaining that he was needed at the Blackwell Manor. Though it was his day off, the storm had increased the demand for help. As Angie and Mikhail exchanged looks, they silently understood the situation. Mikhail said he would come by again some other time and urged Angie to get some rest. Angie thanked him as he left. Her parents exchanged worried glances. Louise spoke first, suggesting that this might be for the best. She believed that once Lord Kylek settled down in the capital, Angie would forget about him and lead a peaceful life with her parents, which seemed like the ideal outcome. Her mother agreed, saying that if the amnesiac was truly safe to consume, It was better than Angie living unhappily with Lord Kylek. She added that staying with Kylek would only make Angie's life difficult, but under their care, there would be no issues. Louise nodded in agreement, saying she would inform Lord Kylek and that they should continue acting as normal. Meanwhile, Martin was running through the rain, heading back to the manor. He had already been informed by Hester that orders had been given to eliminate the Thing when the thunder struck, emphasizing the importance of Mikhail fulfilling his role properly. Out of breath, Mikhail finally arrived back at the manor. He called out Lord Kylek's name, knowing that the thing Kylek wanted would never be his. Kylek, however, was not ready to give up. He asked if there was no other way. The captain, apologizing, explained that it would take at least a week to get everything in order, as the storm had delayed their plans. Kylek accepted this with resignation, stating that it couldn't be helped. He then turned around, and Jerome suggested it would be safer to set sail after the storm had passed. However, he worried that if the fog cleared by then, people might grow suspicious. He asked Kylek how he planned to handle this. Kylek replied that it wouldn't be possible to continue deceiving people with shallow tricks. He believed that eventually, people would discover that leaving the island was possible, and that it was only a matter of time before they were allowed to live freely. He added that remedies were no longer needed. At that moment, a man burst in with urgent news. He informed Kylek that the Risdals had left the manor after meeting with Mrs. Dunst and that the last remaining vial of amnesia had disappeared from the supplies room. Kylek was shocked. Jerome asked what the man meant, and the man continued, revealing that Angie Risdal had slipped out of the annex early that morning and was now at the North Shore. This could only mean that they intended to use the amnesia. Kylek immediately left in a hurry, and Jerome tried to stop him, saying it was too dangerous for him to go alone. He offered to escort Kylek, but Kylek simply said his name in a commanding tone. Kylek extended his hand to Jerome, who hesitated but eventually handed him something from his coat. Kylek took it and mounted his horse, leaving with determination in his eyes, alone in the rain, heading towards his goal. Jerome watched Kylek leave, silently concerned, but knowing there was little he could do to stop him. Mikhail slipped inside, carefully hiding behind a wall as he overheard voices outside. The guards were in a panic, asking why the tranquilizer hadn't worked and demanding more chains to bind the creature. While the guards were busy, Mikhail managed to sneak into the area unnoticed. As he waited, he saw something horrifying. The guards were being killed by a force they couldn't stop, and Mikhail covered his mouth in fear, hoping the creature wouldn't notice him. The thing that had killed the guards was covered in blood and appeared to be a zombie, moving with a slow, lumbering gait. It seemed to notice Mikhail standing in the corner of the cell, but to his relief, it didn't approach. The creature simply left the room, leaving Mikhail standing there, his breath returning after the tense moment. He whispered to himself, stunned by what he had just witnessed, saying he had no idea the creature would look like that. Mikhail carefully stepped out from behind the wall and grabbed the axe that was nearby. He knew he needed to chase after the creature, wondering aloud where it might have gone. His thoughts turned to the forest and the cliffs, suspecting it might be heading in that direction. Meanwhile, Angie was speaking with her mother. Her mother, confused, asked what she meant by her suggestion. Angie explained that they should go to the mainland and start a new life. If they couldn't adapt there, they could always come back to the island. Her mother responded, saying it wasn't as simple as Angie thought. She pointed out that the capital was likely overflowing with skilled workers, and it would be hard to find a place there. Angie was quiet for a moment before her mother continued, stating her own wish, that their family would remain on the island to preserve the peaceful life they had now. Angie, though conflicted, nodded in agreement, though she still harbored doubts. Just then, her father came out with a glass of water. Angie suddenly felt a wave of nausea and nearly vomited. Her father was immediately concerned, asking if she was all right. Angie reassured him that she was fine, but that she felt queasy and would feel better after resting. She explained that Lord Kylek might come looking for her soon, as she hadn't informed him of her whereabouts. She said she needed to make her intentions clear when she saw him and asked her parents to consider her request just this once, to start a new life beyond the island. Her parents were taken aback by her request. Her mother promised she would discuss it with her father, and Angie, relieved, asked if that was true. Her mother affirmed it and suggested she rest for now. She exchanged a glance with her husband, and her father came forward with some medicine for Angie, telling her to take it before going to sleep. He poured the medicine into the water and insisted she drink it all, even though it would be a bit bitter. Angie reluctantly agreed, but before she could take the medicine, a gunshot rang out, startling the entire family. 3 more shots followed, coming from outside the window. It was Kylek, standing there holding a gun. Her father, his voice urgent, told Angie to get up immediately. He insisted they had to leave, as there was an escape route near the cliffs. Angie, panicked, asked why, but her father didn't answer. He just shouted for her to hurry. Kylek, breathing heavily and gripping the gun tightly, stood outside, ready for what was to come. Mikhail stood there, holding a lamp and an axe in his hands, staring at the scene before him. He glanced back and saw the zombie standing near a graveyard. It was John Fitzroy Blackwell, the founder of House Blackwell, who had brought upon his family the most dangerous curse. He had forsaken his humanity, daring to venture into the domain of the gods, and as a result, had become a monster, existing without any consciousness. Mikhail knew this creature had to be eliminated for everyone's sake, especially Angie. Without hesitation, Mikhail charged toward the monster, who saw him coming. With a swift movement, Mikhail used his foot to trip the monster, sending it crashing to the ground. As the creature struggled to get up, Mikhail raised the axe and brought it down on the monster's head with force, causing a splash of blood. Meanwhile, Hester and Louise were walking together. Louise asked where the monster had gone, and Hester replied that she had heard it was heading toward the cemetery. Louise seemed concerned, remarking that the cemetery was the last place they expected it to go. She explained the risks involved in facing the creature, noting that it was immortal. Even if they shot it in the heart or severed its limbs, it would just reattach. Stakes, silver, relics, and holy water had all been ineffective. The best solution, she said, was to imprison it alive in an oak barrel and cast it into the depths of the sea. But perhaps... Suddenly a scream echoed through the air, cutting her off. Hester murmured that it might be possible to destroy the monster. Back at the scene, Mikhail didn't stop. He continued stabbing the creature with the axe, emotionless as if consumed by his task. After breaking his lamp, he grabbed a stick of wood and set the monster ablaze. Hester and Louise arrived, seeing Mikhail standing in front of the burning creature, the flames engulfing it. Mikhail dropped the stick he had been holding and stood motionless, staring at the burning remains of the monster. Mikhail turned to Hester and, in a quiet voice, said her name. His mind had gone blank at first, but then a sudden premonition hit him. He realized he might be able to destroy the creature completely, ensuring it could never come back to life. Mikhail said, almost in disbelief, "I did it." Louise, observing the scene, acknowledged the significance of the moment. She said it was clear that Mikhail carried the bloodline of House Blackwell. Hester agreed, and both women stood together, preparing to pray for their future and for the late master of their house. Mikhail, standing in front of the smoldering remains of the monster, let out a bitter laugh. He spoke solemnly, declaring that the creature would now rest in the depths of hell, where it would pay for its sins for daring to violate taboos and challenge the realm of the divine. Kai stood there, gun in hand, his voice urgent as he tried to reason with Angie. He told her that her parents were not in their right minds and were trying to harm her. He believed that if they truly cared about her, they wouldn't be capable of committing such a horrific act. His words echoed in Angie's mind as she and her father continued to flee. Angie, in her own thoughts, wondered why on earth Kai was trying to kill her. She considered the possibility that Kai's real target was something else entirely. Meanwhile, her mother, desperate and resolute, cried out that they would never let Angie be taken away from them. They would rather die than allow that to happen. Kai fired another bullet toward them, holding the gun with grim determination. He warned them, saying this was his final warning. He needed to stop them before they could administer the amnesiac to Angie. Angie, in a panic, called out for Kai to stop. She turned to him, her voice breaking, pleading for him to listen. But Kai, his face tense, ordered Angie to come to him. Her mother, desperately trying to calm the situation, begged Angie to explain to Kai that they weren't trying to hurt her. She insisted that all their actions were for Angie's sake, but Angie, in disbelief and sorrow, simply whispered her mother's name. In a tragic moment, her mother and father lost their footing and slipped from the cliff, falling directly into the deep sea. Angie was left at the edge of the cliff, sitting there and crying, devastated by the loss. Through her tears, Angie whispered to herself, feeling as if she had been deceived all along. She muttered that it had all been lies. Kai, hearing her anguish, called out to her, but Angie stopped him in his tracks, ordering him not to come any closer. Her voice shook with emotion as she accused him of killing her parents right before her eyes. She asked him why, suspecting it was because they might have stopped him from taking her to the capital. Kai dropped his gun and pleaded with Angie to calm down. He asked for the chance to explain everything, promising that he wouldn't hide anything from her anymore. He begged her to believe in him. Angie, her voice trembling, confessed that even in this dire situation, she still felt torn. Despite everything that had happened between them, she realized she was still swayed by him, and it bitterly upset her. She admitted that if it meant escaping him and the island, perhaps going with him was the best choice. Kai, desperate, watched her as she slowly backed away from him. He called out to her, pleading with her not to leave, but Angie, in her pain and confusion, had already made up her mind. With a final heartbreaking decision, she jumped from the cliff. As she fell, she prayed to God, hoping that this was all just a terrible nightmare. She wished for the chance to wake up and find peace, asking for eternal blessings upon her tragic demise. The seed nurtured in nature, deemed most perfect and bountiful, was destined to become the root of immortality. It was said that those who sought eternal life would pay a price steeped in blood, closely intertwined with their lineage. The man reflected on the weight of his thoughts, acknowledging that if he wished to preserve all he had achieved and ensure his family's continuity, he had no choice but to defy God. He reminded those around him that to obtain the blood of the firstborn, the one who first saw the light of day, was crucial. The secondborn, destined to continue the family lineage, would need to drink a concoction mixed with that blood to receive the blessing of eternal life. He stressed the importance of sacrifice in this forbidden secret, declaring it a legacy their family must carry until death. Kai awoke, drenched in sweat, realizing it had only been a dream. Jerome entered with breakfast, inquiring about Kai's well-being and suggesting he eat something, even if it was just blood. Kai quickly dismissed the idea, feeling nauseous at the mere thought of blood. He then asked Jerome about the search for Angie. Jerome reported that the search parties were scouring every inch of the island, but had yet to find anything. Louise expressed her frustration at the prolonged absence of news about Angie, lamenting that it had been a month since they had been stuck on the island south of the capital. She wished they could find at least a body to provide closure, so that Kai could accept her death and move on with the succession and engagement plans. Letitia questioned if there was any chance that Angie might still be alive, suggesting that perhaps she had been swept away by the storm and rescued by a passing fishing boat, just as Kai had been. Louise countered that the search efforts were exhaustive and that it was unlikely Angie had survived. She emphasized that the succession ceremony needed to occur within the next month without further delay. Letitia, overwhelmed by emotions, began to cry. Louise expressed her disbelief at both Letitia and Kai's attachment to Angie. Meanwhile, Martin checked on Angie, asking if she was all right and if she felt any discomfort. She assured him she was fine, thanking him for his care. Martin noted that everything must feel unfamiliar to her and that she still seemed uneasy. Angie, however, found it hard to believe her current situation. She recounted how she had met Martin in her dream, the sensation of drowning, and how he had saved her, commenting on their striking resemblance. Martin admitted that he was also astonished by the situation. He reassured her that there was ample time to adjust, as they would never part ways now. He then indicated that there was something important he needed to tell her. Angie asked Martin if he had something important to tell her. Martin responded that it was time for her to understand the avarice surrounding them and inquired if she had heard of eternity. When Angie confirmed she had, he pressed her to share how much she knew. After a brief pause, Martin noted that if she was aware of remedies, helpers, and opium rose, that was enough. He speculated that they might have transfused her blood repeatedly in the pursuit of eternity, suggesting it must have been a painful process for her. Angie clarified that she had no memories of anyone extracting her blood, and acknowledged that Martin's words in her dream had prompted her to question everything. Martin expressed his relief at her response, explaining that twins often share a mysterious connection which could have drawn them together through their dreams despite their separation. Angie agreed with him. With a charming demeanor, Martin explained that they were in the kingdom of Vintgar, and Angie confirmed her understanding that this was the capital citadel. Martin continued, describing Vintgar as a constitutional monarchy advancing through the Industrial Revolution, contrasting it with Tri-State, which still clung to an absolute monarchy and experienced occasional peasant uprisings due to the oppressive reign of King Rainier VIII. He warned Angie that there were those who would go to any lengths for immortality: kings, nobles, and wealthy merchants seeking to prolong their enjoyment of power and riches. He recounted the story of John Blackwell, who had succumbed to the temptation of immortality, sacrificing his eldest son to become undead. He explained that the final stage of eternity involved blood karma, which required killing the firstborn and consuming his blood mixed with a drug. Angie was horrified, questioning how anyone could commit such a terrible act and fearing what it meant for Kai. Martin confirmed that Edward Blackwell, Kai's father, had used the older twin as a sacrifice. He emphasized that if Kai had been born first, he would have been the victim. Angie, feeling a surge of emotion, expressed concern that she might be with child and insisted that no one, not even Kai, should know. Meanwhile, at Blackwell Manor, Kai confronted Mikhail, accusing him of being responsible for opening the door to the annex bedroom. Mikhail admitted that he had freed Angie, explaining that the thing had escaped the basement, attacked people, and caused a fire that ravaged the garden and annex, eventually sweeping across the entire island. Kai challenged Mikhail, questioning whether he considered himself her savior. Mikhail clarified that many lives were lost in the fire and that Cullinan Island was now a wasteland, with only a fraction of the original residents surviving. Kai got straight to the point, offering Mikhail funds to leave the place immediately. Mikhail protested, expressing disbelief at Kai's intentions. Kai declared that he had always coveted what was his, Angie, and made it clear that his feelings had not changed. Hester's past memories surfaced, recalling how her sister had harbored a strange desire for Edward Blackwell, calling it love. She had seized an opportunity at the ball to slip a drug into his drink, leading to Mikhail's birth. Hester had done her part. Mikhail asked if he was to be left behind. Hester advised that if he truly loved Angie, he should cherish her. In the present, Mikhail admitted that he had feelings for Angie and had expressed them, but he ultimately gave up. He knelt before Kai, pleading for him to retract the order, promising to forget the past and live quietly while serving Kai. Jerome reported that a person sharing a room with Mikhail Randall had noticed a rose design etched on his chest, hinting at the need for further investigation. He suggested that it could be significant. Angie asked Kai what this meant. Kai explained that the mark had been passed down through generations of House Blackwell and that he had carried it since birth. Angie remarked on its beauty, saying her eyes were drawn to it. Catherine suddenly exclaimed in disbelief upon recognizing Amber, stating that she was indeed alive and looked unchanged, seeing traces of Lillian and Ralph in her face. Martin urged his grandmother to go inside, aware that moving around was difficult for her. He promised to brew her a cup of warm tea with the leaves he had brought. Angie then recalled a faint memory of playing with kittens and shared it with Martin. He was delighted that she remembered, while Catherine chimed in, confirming Angie's love for cats and dogs. Angie added that there had been a massive St. Bernard and kittens, and Martin recounted a moment when one of the kittens had stolen a cookie, causing her to cry. Angie confirmed the memory. As they walked, more memories surfaced for Angie, including the sounds of her parents calling her and her brother when she had been reluctant to go outside. She suddenly realized the extent of the lies that had surrounded her and how they had gnawed away at the truth. She recalled Kai's words about hoping she would always be beside him, which stirred her emotions. Angie expressed a desire to forget him, holding her stomach and wondering how she could genuinely despise Kai, the father of her child. 3 years later, a child called out for his mother, and Angie joyfully greeted Noah as he hugged her. Bryn explained that Noah had insisted on seeing Angie, and she thanked Bryn for bringing him. Bryn asked if Angie would be working late that day, to which Angie replied she hoped to finish up in the afternoon. Bryn shared that everyone had been talking about how wonderful Angie's designs and embroidery were, noting their incredible popularity. Angie humbly remarked that she still had much to learn. Patricia chimed in, expressing disbelief at Angie's modesty, mentioning that even the royal family had commissioned work from her. Angie clarified that they had requested table mats and handkerchiefs and were now interested in hats and negligées. Patricia insisted that everyone knew her as Madam M. Bryn expressed pride in Angie, while Noah declared that she was the best mama. As the seasons changed and spring returned, Angie reflected on her journey of building a new life. She had established her business under the name Amber instead of Angie, and welcomed Noah into the world, cherishing the warmth of her new family. Though memories of the past sometimes caused her pain, she would pray and bury those memories, recognizing that despite the hurt, her past had become nourishment for living in the present. Meanwhile, Jerome informed Kai that diplomatic negotiations were progressing smoothly, noting that neither Vintgar nor Tri-State desired war. Kai inquired when he would be departing for Vintgar, and Jerome replied it would be in 2 days. Kai insisted on a thorough review of their plans to avoid mistakes, emphasizing the importance of the upcoming visit for both himself and House Blackwell. Angie was taken aback, asking for clarification after a man informed her that the royal family of Tri-State had visited that morning and would be staying at Vintgar's royal palace for 3 weeks. He explained that while they were ostensibly there for the parade celebrating Vintgar's founding day, the visit held greater significance as it aimed to establish diplomatic relations between the two countries, a significant turning point for Tri-State. Martin interjected, noting that it seemed Tri-State was beginning to open its doors, abandoning its long-held isolationist policy. Angie contemplated the implications of the Tri-State royal family's presence and realized that as a high-ranking noble family, House Blackwell must also be involved. However, the man reassured her that the roster of the royal entourage did not include Duke Blackwell. He mentioned that only royal guards and senior members of the Privy Council would accompany the royal family. Although he had known about the visit for a week, he hadn't shared the news with her to avoid causing unnecessary worry. Angie apologized for her concern, but the man insisted there was no need to. Despite this reassurance, Angie couldn't shake the feeling that lingered after 3 years. The mere mention of Kai's name still evoked a strong reaction in her. She listened to Martin's conversation, which turned to the Duke's marital status. The man noted that Duke Blackwell had not yet married his fiancée, nor had they had children, speculating whether that was intentional or due to an inability to conceive. He remarked on the mystery surrounding House Blackwell and the continuation of their eternity rituals. Martin added a reassuring note, stating that there had been no reports of missing minors in the last 3 years, which could suggest they had ceased using remedies and performing the eternity ritual. The man expressed hope that this was the case, given that they could no longer obtain opium roses grown on Cullinan Island. However, he cautioned that despite the passage of time providing some safety, Angie remained at risk, advising that they should not let their guard down. Angie silently prayed that those involved sincerely repented for their past actions and would commit no further wrongs. In the kingdom of Vintgar, the princess conveyed her genuine delight that Letitia had joined the delegation, even if belatedly, and expressed hope that her stay in the palace would be comfortable. Letitia was appreciative, admiring her magnificent chamber. As she felt the table, she paused, taken aback. The maid inquired if it met Letitia's liking, explaining that it was a creation of Madame M., who had become renowned for her delicate and sophisticated work, not merely following trends. Letitia's memories surfaced, recalling a moment when she praised Angie's intricate design, astonished that she had created it in just 2 days. Angie had thanked her, and Letitia had encouraged her to set up her own brand, suggesting names like Madame Angelina or Madame Marigold. Letitia remembered how Angie had thought Marigold was perfect. Back in the present, Letitia inquired about the whereabouts of Duke Blackwell. The butler informed her that he was engaged in a meeting to establish diplomatic relations and would be difficult to see until after the Founding Day parade. Letitia hesitated, deciding not to jump to conclusions, and instead asked if he would attend the formal dinner. She resolved to have a simple meal alone and retire early to prepare for the parade. Meanwhile, Amber rushed to find Schultz, startling her as she asked what was happening. Schultz explained that the consul's wife believed everything looked lonely and that the spelling of the children's name was incorrect. Amber was confused, believing the baby's name was Michael. Schultz clarified that while that was the Vintgar pronunciation, the baby's godfather was from Vincentine, where it was spelled Mikhail. Amber understood, realizing that various spellings existed due to the country's diverse immigrant population. Schultz requested Amber's assistance in re-embroidering the name. Amber agreed to complete it quickly, but just then, someone yelled for them to hurry. Schultz noted that the parade must have started and suggested they take a look on their way to the workshop. Amber hesitated, stating she didn't need to, but Schultz insisted she couldn't miss it, urging her to follow. As they walked, Amber marveled at the festivities, with gifts, jewels, and flowers adorning the scene. Just as she was starting to enjoy it, she was shocked to see someone in a carriage, Kai. Startled, Amber wondered why he was there, prompting Schultz to call her name. In a moment of instinct, Angie turned and ran, while Kai stepped out of the carriage and chased after her, having recognized her presence. Angie burst through the doors calling out for Noah. She found Bryn and her father sitting there but was frantically searching for her child. Spotting Noah slipping away, her heart raced. Bryn, sensing her distress, urged Angie to calm down, not fully grasping the situation. Angie informed Bryn that Kai was in Vintgar and realized that he had recognized her. A man suggested that it would be best for Angie to go into hiding until the tri-state delegation left Vintgar. He recommended she head to Levin for the time being and promised to investigate the details of the situation. If it seemed serious, he advised she could go to her aunt in Rorschach. Bryn agreed, stating that Duke Blackwell was unaware of Noah's existence, so there was no need for panic, and noted that it seemed they had also stopped the eternity rituals. Angie concluded it might be wise not to take Noah with her for safety's sake. Bryn reassured her that they would care for him, and Angie expressed her gratitude. She mentioned she had a bit of work to finish, but would leave as soon as possible, asking Bryn to explain everything to Martin. As thoughts of Kai surfaced, she steered her mind away, entrusting Bryn with Noah should anything happen to her. Meanwhile, Kai noted that they had 2 weeks until their return to Tri-State and insisted they must find her before then. He recalled her wearing a brown dress and casual clothes, as if she had merely been out for a stroll, and instructed to expand their search to the outskirts of the citadel. Jerome agreed, telling Kai to leave the search to them and to get some rest after hours of combing the streets. Kai's heart raced, feeling as if the world around him had faded, yet he recognized Angie immediately. But just then, a butler approached, urging him to listen carefully. Jerome urged him to lower his voice, anxious about the news. The butler reported that His Majesty had gone missing, and they were searching every corner of the palace with the help of Vintgar's royal guards, but he was nowhere to be found. The last confirmed sighting of him was around the time the parade ended. Jerome was shocked, recalling Rainier VIII, the puppet king of Tri-State, known for his cowardice. Kai feared that someone might be attempting to dispose of him, suspecting the second in line to the throne was waiting for an opportunity. Kai ordered an investigation into Grand Duke Winston, specifically concerning whom he had been in secret contact with. That night, in a quiet corner, knights were discussing their plans. One knight remarked that the parade had been the perfect opportunity, as Vintgar's royal guards had flocked to the event while their puppet king stayed hidden in the palace. Another knight agreed, praising their master's decision. Then, a voice emerged from the shadows. Mikhail had appeared, prompting the knight to check if he was dozing off. Mikhail listened attentively as the knights explained their plan to follow the new master's instructions and remove the puppet king. They emphasized the importance of framing evidence as if it originated from Vintgar, which would allow their master to justify severing diplomatic ties with that kingdom. Mikhail remained contemplative, recalling his past experiences. Hester entrusted him with an additional task, asking him to discreetly contact Grand Duke Winston to obtain a secret order without drawing attention from his lordship. In the present, a knight confirmed the master's intentions to seek compensation from Vintger while simultaneously addressing a troubling issue. Mikhail agreed, noting that the master and the Privy Council aimed for a society structured by class. Curious about the Puppet King's whereabouts, he inquired about the location where he was being kept. Kai responded that, with the royal family of Vintger's approval, they would soon restrict access to the royal palace. Until the king was found, no one from the tri-state would be permitted to leave the citadel, and all communication would be closely monitored. Kai mentioned that any oversight would be addressed later. One man hesitated, suggesting they inform the tri-state about the situation. Kai dismissed this, explaining that Vintgar's royal family would provide ample soldiers to aid in the search, rendering tri-state's knowledge unnecessary. As murmurs circulated among the gathered people, Kai assured them that the nation's founding celebration would continue as planned, allowing the search to proceed without raising suspicion. He reasoned that the public would view the presence of soldiers as a security measure. A man expressed his uncertainty regarding the trustworthiness of Vintgar's royal family, pointing out the king's disappearance amidst festivities attended by Vintgar's elite guards. Kai countered this by noting that, while Vintgar's elite soldiers were outside, the guest palace was surrounded by tri-state cavalry, suggesting they consider who might be responsible for the king's situation. The room fell silent, contemplating his words. Kai proposed viewing Vintgar's willingness to assist favorably, suggesting they leverage it for diplomatic gain. He advised everyone to remain within the guest palace for their safety and to ensure they had guards at all times. As Kai and Jerome walked through the hallway, Kai voiced his concerns about Grand Duke Winston, suggesting the timing of events felt too coincidental. He revealed that the king had been scheduled to discuss the abolition of the monarchy and support for national elections with Vintgar's royal family shortly after the festivities. Jerome acknowledged the implications, recognizing the king's desire to escape. Kai then asked about Mikhail Randall's whereabouts. When Jerome expressed confusion, Kai instructed him to discreetly monitor Mikhail without drawing attention. Jerome questioned Kai's trust in Mikhail, to which Kai replied that he felt cautious about everyone at the moment. Jerome agreed to assign someone to follow Mikhail and report any unusual behavior. Just then, Kai began coughing, a small amount of blood escaping his throat. Jerome grew concerned and offered to summon a physician, but Kai reassured him, insisting he only needed rest. Jerome noted Kai's frequent coughing, but Kai maintained he would seek treatment upon returning to Tri-State with Angie, emphasizing the importance of being well. Later that night, a masked man quietly descended into the storeroom. He opened a door to find a man tied up, trying to speak. Leaning closer, the masked figure remarked on the irony of the situation, implying that those deemed unworthy often found themselves in such predicaments. Though he felt no need to reveal his identity, he offered this individual a final gesture of courtesy. As he identified the man as Mikhail Randall, he withdrew a dagger and gently plunged it into the man multiple times, leaving him on the ground. Despite this, the man remained alive. In a bar, two men engaged in conversation. The first man recounted a recent experience, mentioning that he had picked up a peculiar passenger at Lübeck Central Station. He couldn't see her face, obscured by her bonnet, but he suspected she was a noblewoman dressed in plain attire to hide her identity. The other man dismissed it, stating that he often gave rides to nobles himself. The first man continued, noting it was unusual for her to travel to such a remote location at dawn. When she disembarked at Leven Lake, a man who seemed to be her attendant handed him a tip that was 5 times the usual fare for the carriage ride. The second man raised an eyebrow, questioning if he thought it was hush money. The first man affirmed this, explaining they had instructed him not to tell anyone about taking them to Lavon. He concluded that they were clearly seeking a discreet location for a rendezvous. Nearby, Mikhail listened intently to their conversation before quietly stepping out of the bar. The next day, Angie, while cleaning clothes, felt a mix of thrill and confusion over how Mikhail had found her. When Mikhail approached, he greeted her, noting it had been a while. Angie, startled, questioned if she was dreaming. Mikhail assured her it was real, expressing disbelief at seeing someone who resembled her near the Ebenhof village hall, even though her hair was a different color. He apologized for following her silently, explaining that he had thought something terrible had happened to her that day. Angie revealed she had suffered an accident but received help, managed to reunite with long-lost family members, and regained her memories. Mikhail acknowledged her journey, celebrating her ability to break free from the shackles of eternity. Curious about each other's lives, Angie asked about Mikhail, mentioning she heard the whole island had burned down and everyone had to evacuate. Mikhail suggested they discuss this over a meal, expressing regret at leaving without catching up, even though he was just making a quick stop in the village. Angie agreed, suggesting they meet by the nearby lake after she made dinner for her grandmother. Mikhail confirmed the plan and assured her he would wait. Upon returning home, Angie asked her grandmother if she was hungry and informed her about meeting someone for dinner. When her grandmother did not respond, Angie grew concerned, wondering if she was asleep. She searched the bedroom and hall, but her grandmother was nowhere to be found. Noticing a note on the dining table, she read it and felt terror grip her. The note stated, "I have arranged for a car to wait for you at the back entrance. I have no intention of harming your grandmother, but I advise you not to seek help from anyone. I hope you will choose wisely." Angie struggled to comprehend how Kai had managed to find her, confusion swirling in her mind. She whispered to herself, urging calm, reminding herself that she couldn't afford to delay. Mikhail had left earlier, and time was of the essence. After getting ready, she grabbed her bag and stepped out of the house, where a carriage awaited her. The driver signaled for her to get in, but fear held her back. Once she finally sat down, the carriage began to move, and she discreetly planned to leave behind some dresses. Angie thought to herself that perhaps someone would discover her trail. Upon arriving at the manor, she saw Kai standing there welcoming her inside. Kai greeted her, saying he had been waiting. Angie felt an icy chill in the air, mixed with the pungent scent of roses, as memories of their time together flooded back, rendering her attempts to forget them futile. She recalled heart-wrenching moments when it felt like only the two of them existed in the world. Concerned, Angie asked where her grandmother was, demanding that Kai send her home immediately. Kai reassured her that her grandmother had gone to Lavon of her own accord and promised to arrange for her safe return. He asked if there was anything else she wished to know. Angie, overwhelmed with questions, pressed him, asking what he wanted from her and whether he still intended to make her his mistress. Kai, taken aback, explained that all he wanted was to confirm her safety and clarify misunderstandings between them. Angie retorted that nothing he said could change the events that had transpired. Kai insisted that his relationship with Letitia Durbin was purely for appearances. He explained that if she had not become betrothed to him, her life would have been in jeopardy, just like anyone else caught in a dangerous situation. Angie, confused, asked him to clarify. Kai revealed that Letitia was not Harold's real daughter, but rather a sacrificial lamb for his ambitions. He believed that if their engagement had been broken, Letitia would have disappeared without a trace. He had tried to protect her, knowing she was Angie's closest friend. He then recounted that on the day of the cliff incident, Angie's parents had attempted to make her drink an amnesiac, a drug that wipes memories clean. He couldn't stand by and let that happen. Angie, in disbelief, claimed she knew her parents were her real ones and that their love for her was genuine. Kai interrupted, stating that they had tried to shield her from the truth to preserve her happiness. He expressed his desire to share the truth for her sake, wanting a life of honesty with her. Angie hesitated, unsure. Even if Kai's words were true, she was reluctant to dwell on the past. She admitted that facing him had been extremely difficult and questioned what he truly wanted from her. Kai implored her to trust him one more time, expressing his intent to break the curse once and for all. He hoped that when the time came, she would love him again. Kai declared that he would prove himself to Angie. She wrestled with the notion that all her time with him might have been a lie. The sweet nothings he whispered, his tender kisses, his vows of love. Yet, she pondered if there had been a truth in those gestures that she had overlooked, perhaps the reason he hadn't given up on her. Angie replied that she would wait. After eternity had been completely eradicated and Kai was finally free, She promised to wait until everything was settled. Kai asked if she would truly wait for him. Angie nodded in affirmation. With a sigh, Kai expressed his gratitude for her willingness to give him another chance. Angie cautioned that her feelings of resentment wouldn't vanish overnight, but she wanted to try to believe in herself and in the feelings she had once held for him. She urged him not to let her down this time. Kai promised he wouldn't, stating he would tell her nothing but the truth each day. He then kissed her forehead, expressing hope that he could be by her side again. As he kissed her cheek, they were interrupted by the sound of a door opening. Jerome entered, exclaiming that he had received a report that the Emperor's body had been found in the citadel a few hours earlier. Both Angie and Kai were shocked. Jerome insisted it was a setup, claiming that Kai would never do such a thing. Kai interrupted, urging him to hold his tongue and asking if they had any proof. A man in the room stated that a poisonous pen belonging to Kai had been discovered in the Emperor's inner pocket. He explained that if the Emperor had used it even before being abducted, he would have been poisoned by contact. The man added that the Emperor had left behind a decisive clue, KYLE, the first 4 letters of Kai's name, as he spent his final moments trying to alert them to the culprit. Angie interjected, pointing out that names could be spelled differently across regions. For example, Michael might be spelled Mikhail in others. Kai felt shocked and amazed that Angie was on his side. He stated that he would prove his innocence at the police station. Angie tried to speak, but Kai urged her to go home, emphasizing that it wasn't safe for her to stay. He kissed her on the forehead before leaving and whispered something to her as he departed with the police. One of the officers inquired about the anonymous tip. Angie felt a wave of shock wash over her. The officer explained that tracking the chalk powder would lead straight to the Duke, indicating that the chalk scattered on the ground had saved them a lot of time. Angie wondered who could have possibly made an anonymous tip about the chalk powder. Turning around, she concluded that she should head home for now. As she was leaving, Mikhail appeared and called out to her, asking what she was doing there. Mikhail expressed concern for Angie, asking if she was all right and if she was hurt anywhere. Angie reassured him that she was fine, but questioned why he was there. Mikhail explained that he had waited for her that day, but when she didn't show up, he went looking for her. He mentioned finding the chalk powder and reporting it to the police. Since he felt there was little more he could do, he planned to return to Tri-State. Realizing it was Mikhail who reported the powder, Angie felt a sense of understanding. Mikhail then asked what had happened to her. Angie noted it was a long story, explaining that she had met Lord Kylik, and they managed to clear up misunderstandings that had built over time. Mikhail was curious about the nature of those misunderstandings. Angie elaborated that Kai had explained his relationship with Letitia and revealed he was trying to put an end to the eternity that bound them. Mikhail probed further, asking if she had decided to join hands with him again. Angie admitted that she didn't fully trust Kai yet, but if he returned to her after fulfilling his promises, she would consider taking his hand again. Mikhail offered his assistance, mentioning he had heard Kai was arrested on charges of assassinating the Emperor. He urged Angie to come with him to Tri-State to testify on Kai's behalf, explaining that House Blackwell's supporters would welcome any testimony that could clear his name, even at the cost of public trust. Angie requested a little time to send a letter home. Meanwhile, at the police station, officers were discussing the situation. One policeman questioned why Kai would commit such an act, while another suggested it was obvious: a rebellion aimed at ushering in a new emperor. The first officer pointed out that House Blackwell was already powerful enough without the throne's backing. Another officer chimed in, mentioning the discussion surrounding the spelling of the name found. He noted that the wrist of the corpse was tilted slightly to the right, indicating the letters had been started from the middle rather than the beginning. He speculated that the reason there was another letter before Kyle was due to the ink not flowing well, leading to a darker mark caused by blood instead. While they talked, Mikhail listened intently. Martin reflected on the merciless slashes of a knife and recalled witnessing someone kill another without hesitation. It had been Mikhail. Terrified, he covered his mouth, wondering why that memory had resurfaced. He recalled the cruel boy named Mikhail and noted that there were some overlapping letters in their names, but he assumed Mikhail had died after the disaster on the island. Meanwhile, Bryn received a letter from Angie stating she would return as soon as she had taken care of things and that Mikhail was helping her. She described him as a kind person whom she had known since her days on Cullinan Island. On the train, Mikhail shared that he had thought about intercepting Angie's letter home, considering she might mention him. Angie had fallen asleep on his lap, and a bottle lay on the ground. Mikhail reflected that it no longer mattered. She was with him now, and they would never be apart again. He envisioned finding their own heaven and building a life just for her, professing his love for Angie. Letitia reacted in disbelief, asking what Jerome was talking about. Jerome insisted there wasn't much time and urged her to leave before they came to question her, reminding her that this was the Duke's command. He warned that if she remained, she could fall into Harold's clutches again. Letitia realized that Harold was on his way there too. Jerome conveyed that his lordship wanted her to know he apologized for making her a sacrificial lamb. Letitia accepted this, stating she would leave at once and asked Jerome to express her gratitude for his thoughtfulness during such a time. She then inquired about Angie's safety. Meanwhile, Grand Duke Winston entered Kai's cell. He remarked on Kai's dignified appearance, even behind bars. Kai responded with sarcasm, questioning the honor of Winston's visit to such a sordid place. Winston noted that Kai had built quite a solid reputation for himself, as half the Privy Council continued to defend him. Kai asserted his innocence, reminding Winston that he had been in the guest palace at the time of the crime. He sarcastically questioned how he could have murdered the Emperor unless he was capable of splitting his body in two. Winston raised his hands, signaling the policeman to leave them alone. He dismissed the idle chatter, declaring it was time for Kai to make his confession, suggesting that the outcome of the affair had already been decided. Kai retorted that it seemed Winston was the one making a confession. Winston explained that the outcome would be determined by the triumph of good over evil, asserting he would soon ascend the throne and have nothing to fear. Kai countered that he was sorry to disappoint Winston, but he was afraid that was not the case. Winston's anger boiled over as he responded to Kai. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. The policeman announced that a letter had arrived from Blackwell Manor. Winston, intrigued, took the letter handed to him by the policeman, while Kai observed with shock. Kai noted the red seal, realizing it could only be used by the head of the family. He wondered if it could be. Winston laughed triumphantly, ordering the letter to be delivered to the Justice of the Supreme Court immediately. He explained that it was a statement from a long-serving housekeeper of House Blackwell. The letter stated, "I regret that I cannot present tangible evidence. However, I offer this testimony at great personal risk in defense of House Blackwell because I believe that justice and loyalty to the imperial family should take precedence above all else. May any further ill intention toward His Imperial Majesty and the royal family cease, and may the blessings of the divine be bestowed upon them. Louise Dunst, head housekeeper of House Blackwell." Kai was left speechless. Winston declared that Kai had no further recourse, officially endorsing Mikhail Randall, the illegitimate son of the late Edward Blackwell, as the interim head of House Blackwell. He thought it might be easier to manipulate the situation and cover up the secrets of the Black Mass rather than attempt to persuade Kai. Kai, unfazed, stated he didn't care about any of it, only concerned for Angie. He reflected on how he had told her he would come for her and that no harm must befall her. He emphasized that she at least must remain safe. At that moment, Angie was sleeping on a bed and suddenly woke up. Mikhail stood near the window in the place he had brought Angie to. He remarked that they called this place Te Deum, a hymn of praise to God. He thought it was a fitting name, as it represented both his Te Deum and Angie. Angie woke up, confused, and asked what was happening. She reminded Mikhail that they were supposed to go to Tri-State together and questioned why she was wearing what she was. Mikhail explained that Kai was beyond hope now, set to undergo a fair trial for his crimes, and that his sentence would likely be determined within a few days. He asked Angie what she could possibly change by going to Tri-State. Angie was taken aback by his words. Mikhail then suggested they start over, just the two of them. Angie was bewildered, asserting that something was wrong with him, insisting he was not the Mikhail she once knew. Mikhail smirked and claimed she was familiar with someone similar to him in many ways. He pulled up his chest tattoo, revealing it to be similar to Kai's birthmark. Angie realized this symbol had been passed down through generations of House Blackwell. Mikhail continued, stating that he could tell by her expression that she understood without needing a lengthy explanation. He revealed that he was Kai Blackwell's half-brother and explained he had been taking eternity since he was young like Kai. He described how his eye and hair color changed due to a side effect, forcing him into hiding for 10 years to keep the secret. He stated that meeting her made her his sole savior, and now that he would be head of House Blackwell, nothing could come between them. They would build a life together. However, Angie slapped his hands away and expressed her sorrow, stating she didn't love him and that she didn't understand how this misunderstanding had arisen. Angie retreated and dashed away. Mikhail acknowledged that she would need time to come to terms with reality. Outside, maids of House Blackwell were enjoying the manor's beauty, feeling blessed to work there and earning a high income despite their lack of experience. Louise informed Hester that there were 4 maids for now, and they planned to recruit more next month, depending on circumstances. Hester responded affirmatively. Louise then noticed Angie running out, breathless. Louise called out to her, concerned. Angie begged to be taken along, promising she would compensate them generously if they could just give her a ride. The man hesitated, apologizing that he was a servant of House Blackwell. Angie was shocked by this revelation. Mikhail emerged, calling out to Angie. He gave Louise a pointed stare, and she advised him to ignore Angie, claiming she wasn't in her right mind. The maids were astonished. Angie stood there, stunned and numb, watching Mikhail leave. Mikhail informed her that nothing would work, that no one could leave the place without his permission. Angie retorted that if this was who he truly was, he was no different from his grandfather. She pointed out that at least Kai had genuinely tried to change things for his family and end eternity. In a fit of anger, Mikhail slapped Angie, telling her that was enough and that he didn't want to hear any more from her. Mikhail suggested that Angie needed to spend some time by herself until she came to her senses. In a basement, Angie found herself locked up, her mouth gagged with cloth to prevent her from yelling. Despite her numerous efforts, she couldn't free herself. Desperately, Angie thought she had to escape to see for herself whether everything Mikhail had said was true. Suddenly, someone called her from behind, and Angie recognized the voice. Winston approached, admiring Kai's resilience even amid his suffering and humiliation. He remarked that perhaps, instead of sending Kai to the gallows, they should put him to work as an escort, filling the state coffers with people lining up to see him. Kai responded sarcastically, questioning whether that was Winston's way of expressing his lust for him. Winston retorted, implying Kai thought he was clever. He revealed that Kai's loyal servant, Jerome, had visited him the previous day, begging him to deliver a message to his master. Winston mentioned Angie by name, which caused Kai to flinch, stating she was at the Blackwell estate in southern Scarborough, at a place called Demise. He suggested that now, with a new head of House Blackwell, she had fallen for that bastard child. Kai, unfazed, mentioned he knew what Winston wanted to know and proceeded to share that Duke John Fitzroy Blackwell, the founder of their family, lived to the age of 103 until a great fire ravaged Cullinan Island 3 years prior. Winston reacted with intrigue, questioning whether it meant Duke John had not been fully immortal since he had burned to death. Kai explained that at the time, they were still working on improving the side effects of the elixir of immortality, noting that there were other conditions, but it wasn't the appropriate venue for such discussions. Winston urged Kai to consider that he could be pardoned immediately due to insufficient evidence, depending on his choices. Kai cryptically remarked that all the secrets lay in Demise, calling it the new Cullinan Island. Earlier, during Kai's arrest, Jerome had called out to him, urging discretion in sending Angie back so she wouldn't attract attention. He assured Kai that both her grandmother and Letitia would be safe, and Kai inquired about the progress of the drug development. Jerome informed him that the clinical trials had been completed just 2 days prior. Kai resolved to remain in jail until the drug was finished, requesting Jerome to signal him when the time was right, advising him to concoct a plausible excuse to keep Grand Duke Winston from suspecting anything. In the present, Kai proposed to Winston that if he could ensure his release, he would personally take him to where the family's secrets were hidden. Winston agreed to have Kai transferred to the Royal Palace prison for the time being, but cautioned that the pardon would take days to process as the Privy Council and Judicial Assembly needed to convene for approval. Kai insisted that it shouldn't be publicly known that he was staying there, as it would benefit Winston if Tedium remained unaware of their agreement. Winston planned a surprise visit to Tedium in 3 days, stating that Kai would accompany him disguised as his bodyguard. Kai thought it was a solid plan, mentally vowing to protect Angie fiercely if anyone dared to harm her. The girl who recognized Angie was none other than Annette, a former co-worker from her time at House Blackwell. Annette expressed her disbelief at seeing Angie and asked if she was okay. She mentioned that so much had changed since they moved to the island and that she had a lot to tell Angie, but she had to leave for now, promising to return soon. As Annette departed, she was careful to avoid being seen. She hid behind a wall when she spotted Louise and Mikhail approaching. Mikhail, upon seeing Angie looking pitiful, remarked that it broke his heart. Angie, distressed, called out for Noah, apologizing profusely for her poor baby. Mikhail, confused, turned to Louise, who also looked shocked. Mikhail then pondered if this was what they called fate, before revealing that while examining documents about eternity, he had stumbled upon an intriguing fact. He explained that the first person to partake in eternity was not his grandfather, but someone else entirely. Louise asked for clarification, and Mikhail shared that 100 years ago, the abbot of Roche Monastery in Kroshan province had lived to be 98 by sacrificing his own nephew's blood. Louise was taken aback, asking if he truly meant his own nephew. Mikhail confirmed this, adding that the abbot wanted to avoid the trouble of having 2 children to sacrifice for the eternity ritual. He then ordered Louise to bring him a midwife, who was skilled and experienced. After tying Angie's mouth again, Mikhail kissed her on the head, stating they needed to check if her body bore signs of childbirth. He insisted that if she had a child, they must find it by any means necessary. Louise questioned whether Mikhail suspected the child was from a union with Lord Kylek. Mikhail asserted that it was not merely a suspicion, but a certainty, claiming that Angie would never have carried another man's seed. He urged Louise to hurry, warning that the imperial delegation would soon arrive in Tedium, meaning Grand Duke Winston planned to pressure them into revealing the secrets of eternity. He emphasized the need to have a card up their sleeve and instructed Louise to move quickly. Mikhail then turned to Angie, promising to return the following day and expressing his willingness to forgive her for her waywardness, hoping she would extend the same goodwill to him. As Mikhail left, Angie trembled in fear. Angie declared that she would never allow them to take Noah away from her. Outside the castle, the rain poured down as Mikhail and his workers stood by the seashore, preparing to welcome Winston. Mikhail asked Louise if everything was ready, to which she confirmed that it was. He inquired about a certain substance, and Louise assured him that they would provide water and tea as soon as the guests arrived, adding that all the meal preparations were complete. Mikhail expressed satisfaction and suggested they greet the foolish Duke. As Winston dined, he expressed gratitude for the warm welcome, despite the sudden nature of his visit. He remarked on the dreary weather, noting that it seemed no different from the north, perhaps even worse. Nevertheless, he found the wine exceptional and laughed heartily. Mikhail observed Winston's intoxication as he spoke. Winston mentioned having heard an intriguing rumor about an extraordinary secret passed down through generations of the Blackwell family. Mikhail feigned ignorance and asked what secret he was referring to. Winston revealed that he was talking about the secret of mortality, causing Mikhail to flinch slightly at the mention. Mikhail responded with a jest, claiming it was amusing. However, Winston insisted there was no need for pretense, stating that he already knew everything. Mikhail then laughed and began to explain that House Blackwell possessed a doctrinal text known as the Black Mass, which detailed methods for attaining eternal life. Winston eagerly inquired about its whereabouts, demanding it be brought to him immediately. Mikhail remained unfazed by Winston's urgency and continued eating his meal. He then posed a crucial question. To attain immortality, one must sacrifice their first son. He asked Winston if he was prepared to accept such a condition. Shocked, Winston exclaimed in disbelief at the absurdity of Mikhail's claim. Mikhail reiterated that Lord Derek, Winston's firstborn son and heir, must be offered as a sacrifice in exchange for immortality. Angered, Winston slammed his hands on the table and called Mikhail a bastard for such nonsense. Mikhail calmly explained that fulfilling the ritual's fundamental conditions required this sacrifice, and suggested that since Winston could always have another child, perhaps Derek wasn't so valuable after all if he wouldn't give him up for an immortal life. Furious at Mikhail's audacity, after having elevated him to his current position, Winston shouted at him to shut his filthy mouth. Suddenly overwhelmed by a heart attack, Winston collapsed onto the ground. Mikhail sneered at his pathetic state, while Winston managed to utter a weak accusation about what Mikhail had done. Winston then noticed that all his knights were also succumbing to heart attacks. Confused and gasping for breath, he demanded to know what had been put into their drinks. Mikhail revealed that they had all ingested poison derived from a deadly plant native to Cullinan Island. He explained that it did not react with silver and that he was immune due to having grown up on the island. Winston cursed Mikhail as nothing but a bastard child. In response, Mikhail stood up and delivered a powerful kick to Winston. He commanded his men to scour the surroundings and ensure that no one was left breathing and that no one escaped. Meanwhile, Kai stood outside the manor, cloaked in black garments as rain continued to fall around him. Annette urged Angie to take her chance amidst the chaos outside. Confused, Angie asked what Annette meant by chaos. Annette explained that there was a huge commotion in the main building, but admitted she didn't know the details, as she had seized the opportunity to slip out. She pointed out that many ships were at the dock, indicating it was a good time for Angie to escape. Angie picked up a broken wooden object as Annette continued, revealing that she had expected only Grand Duke Vincent to visit, but police officers from Vintgar had also arrived unexpectedly. Angie expressed surprise at the mention of police officers. The police officers apologized for their sudden appearance, stating they were there to escort Kylik Blackwell. A butler interjected, informing them that the Duke was currently in the capital and questioned whether they were aware of this. The police officer explained that they had written approval from Vintgar's royal family in Parliament, stating that Lord Blackwell had been pardoned due to lack of evidence and that they had come under the impression he would be present. The butler protested, unable to comprehend the situation. The police officers clarified that given the seriousness of the case, they needed to conduct another investigation. However, they suspected they knew who the real culprit was, and believed the accusations would soon be dropped, leading to Lord Blackwell's release. The butler questioned how this could be true, and why Lord Blackwell was being taken by Vintgar instead of Tri-State. The police officers revealed that Lord Blackwell was now a citizen of Vintgar. An application for asylum had been made during a recent diplomatic mission and had been formally approved days prior. As Annette and Angie prepared to leave the cell where Angie had been trapped, Louise suddenly appeared and held Annette at knife point, ordering her to withdraw immediately upon completing her mission. Angie was shocked to see Mrs. Dunst and pleaded with her to let Annette go. Louise coldly replied that if Angie wanted Annette to live, she should forget about trying to escape. Otherwise, there would be consequences. Annette cried out in fear. Desperate, Angie begged Louise to stop and offered to go wherever she took her if only Annette would be released. Louise retorted that she should have gotten rid of Angie long ago, and then ominously mentioned carrying out a final ritual involving Angie's child. Suddenly, Louise was struck from behind and fell to the ground as a voice from the shadows inquired about the child. The sound of a gun being reloaded echoed in the room as Kai demanded answers from Louise about whether Angie had a child. Louise confirmed it, addressing him as "my lord." Kai then asked if it was his child, and upon receiving confirmation from Louise, he turned around and shot her. Angie was taken aback by Kai's presence as he apologized for arriving late. They embraced after a long separation. Kai expressed concern over Angie's appearance and attire, attributing it all to Mikhail's influence, whom he referred to as a bastard. Angie reassured him that she was fine now that he was there, and suggested focusing on their escape. Kai informed her that Jerome had prepared a boat behind the chapel for their getaway. Angie checked on Annette, who just wanted to leave the place behind. As they began running toward freedom, Annette remarked on how this situation might lead to someone's end. Kai instructed them to wait while he fetched some light since it was dark and they might lose their footing. Annette offered her help. Angie warned them both to be careful. Once her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she would manage well enough when suddenly Mikhail grabbed Angie from behind and covered her mouth. Kai drew his gun and aimed it at Mikhail, who commanded him to drop his weapon while addressing him as Kylik Blackwell. Kai confronted Mikhail, calling him a crazy bastard, asserting that their fight would only end with one of them dead. Mikhail smirked and told Kai to jump. Angie felt a surge of fear as she realized that behind the mirrors lay water deep enough to kill anyone. Mikhail taunted Kai, saying that death would be almost instantaneous in those waters if he truly wished to save Angie. Desperate, Angie pleaded with Mikhail to let Kai go, promising to go with him willingly. Mikhail questioned whether she would still agree if it meant never seeing Kai again. Angie smiled through her tears, but remained silent. Suddenly, Mikhail's smile vanished as Angie stabbed him with the piece of wood she had picked up earlier. She declared that he could take her with him, but she wouldn't allow him to harm Kai. Mikhail began to respond, but Angie attacked him again. Annette seized the moment, shouting for Angie to take her chance. Before Angie could process what was happening, Mikhail grabbed her hand and they both fell into the water. Kai felt a wave of despair wash over him as he realized he had lost her for the second time. The police officers arrived, bewildered by the scene unfolding before them. One officer asked what had happened while another responded with confusion. The policeman rushed toward the seashore, where one shouted that someone had fallen into the lake and urged others to jump in and rescue them. Angie felt as though it was all coming to an end once again, resigning herself to the profound darkness surrounding her. As she fell, someone grabbed her hand. It was Kai. He reassured her that they would never be separated again. Angie expressed her gratitude, calling him her savior, for reaching out to her in the deep darkness. The police officers managed to pull Angie out of the water, and she coughed violently as they wrapped a blanket around her for warmth. Concerned, she asked where Kai was. She spotted Kai lying nearby, blood trickling from his mouth. The policeman informed her that he was losing too much blood, and there was little they could do at that moment. Determined, Angie thought there had to be a way to help him. She noticed a pair of scissors and recalled a remedy she had learned about. The policemen were shocked and confused by her actions as she injured her own hands, causing them to bleed. Angie pleaded with them to step aside, insisting that Kai needed her blood. A policeman questioned what was happening, wondering if they should stop Angie. Jerome intervened, urging them to remain where they were. Angie pressed Kai's mouth against her bleeding hands, allowing him to drink her blood. She pleaded with God for help. Suddenly, Kai woke up and bit Angie, drinking her blood directly through the bite. The onlookers were frightened by his actions. Kai finally regained consciousness and let out a breath of relief. Angie expressed her gratitude, feeling immensely relieved that he was awake. However, she soon fainted. Kai called out to her in concern. "Angie?" 3 months later, a letter began with hopes that it would reach its recipient in good health. The writer inquired about the summer in Hessen and reported that everything was progressing smoothly under the recipient's guidance. They mentioned a pathologist in Vincentine who had published research on the genetic traits of blood, revealing that human blood could be classified into distinct types known as blood types. This discovery meant that individuals with matching blood types could undergo transfusions, explaining why certain remedies were compatible with their masters. The writer lamented that much suffering could have been avoided had this knowledge been available earlier, but expressed relief at finally uncovering the truth. They assured the recipient that they would no longer be plagued by the curse, and that it would not be necessary to send extra personnel. The letter continued, mentioning Letitia, who had crossed paths with the writer and was doing everything possible to assist with their work. It noted that she seemed to be faring well since severing ties with her adoptive father, suggesting that faith truly works in mysterious ways. Noah interrupted excitedly, calling for his father and announcing that he had made cookies with Annette. He asked where his mother was. Kai hushed him gently, explaining that his mother was dreaming a very happy dream. As evening fell, Angie remained asleep. When she finally awoke, she wondered how long she had been sleeping and noticed the sun setting. Kai offered her some cookies and asked how the medication Jerome sent was working. Angie inquired if it was having any effect, to which Kai responded positively, but mentioned they would need to observe its effects for a while longer since it was new. Angie pointed out that Kai unconsciously touched a sensitive spot on her body, but reassured him that it didn't hurt and reminded him they had promised not to dwell on the past. Kai reflected on Angie, pondering how different her life might have been if his family had never initiated the eternity ritual. He mused that she could have lived a happy and peaceful life without ever crossing paths with the cursed heir of a ducal house living on a secluded island. He shivered at the thought of all the misfortunes they had endured, but felt he could finally be genuinely happy. Bryn called out for Angie just as Jerome and Letitia arrived to meet them. Kai found solace in believing their trials had brought them together. He envisioned Angie smiling brightly as she reached out toward him as always. Therefore, he offered a prayer of gratitude to his grandfather, who unknowingly brought them together, wishing for him to find rest in the depths of hell while asking God to bless his demise.